I never asked to be born into this family. Hell, I never asked to be born at all. But here I am, Michelle, the unwanted firstborn of a broken marriage. My earliest memories are tainted with the bitterness of divorce. I was barely out of diapers when my parents split up. By the time I was 3, Mom remarried to a guy named Tom. Tom wasn't all bad, I guess. He doted on my mom, showered her with gifts and attention. But it was clear from the start that I was just baggage that came along with the package deal. Things changed when I was 5. Mom got pregnant, and suddenly the whole world revolved around the precious new baby growing in her belly. Tom was over the moon, talking endlessly about his child as if I didn't even exist. The day my sister Emily was born, I might as well have turned invisible. Tom held her like she was made of glass, cooing and making faces I'd never seen before. Mom beamed with pride, as if this was her first child. "Michelle," Mom said, finally remembering I existed. "Come meet your baby sister. You're going to be such a big help with her." I peered into the bundle of blankets, seeing a wrinkled red face that looked more like a potato than a baby. "Hi," I mumbled, not feeling the instant connection everyone seemed to expect. From that day forward, my childhood ended. I wasn't just Michelle anymore, I was Emily's big sister, the built-in babysitter, the little helper. "Michelle, watch your sister while I make dinner." "Michelle, can you change Emily's diaper?" "Michelle, why don't you read Emily a bedtime story?" It never ended. Every time I tried to sneak away to play with my friends or just have a moment to myself, I'd hear the familiar refrain, "Michelle, where are you? Emily needs you." I grew to resent that tiny, squalling creature that had stolen my place in the family. But whenever I showed the slightest hint of frustration, I was met with disappointment and lectures. "You're a big girl now, Michelle," Mom would say, her voice stern. "It's time to start acting like it. Emily needs you to be a good role model." "Yeah," Tom would chime in. "You should be grateful to have such a wonderful little sister. Some kids would kill for that opportunity." And so began the pattern that would define my childhood, always putting Emily first, always pushing my own needs and wants aside. I was Michelle the babysitter, Michelle the helper, Michelle the invisible girl. As Emily grew older, the divide in our family became more pronounced. By the time she was 7 and I was 12, it was clear to everyone, including me, who the favorite child was. "Michelle, Emily needs your room for her art and music," Mom announced one day. "You'll be moving into her old room this weekend." I stared at her in disbelief. "But, that's my room. I've had it since I was little." Tom stepped in, his voice patronizing. "Now, Michelle, you're old enough to understand. Emily needs more space for her hobbies. Her synthesizer and easel take up a lot of room." "What about my things?" I protested weakly. "Where will I put my books in?" "You'll make it work," Mom interrupted. "Emily's talents need nurturing. You want to support your sister, don't you?" There it was again, the guilt trip, the expectation that I'd sacrifice everything for Emily without complaint. I bit my tongue and nodded, fighting back tears. The move was just another blow to my already fragile sense of belonging. Emily, of course, was thrilled. She pranced around her new, spacious room, smirking at me as I crammed my belongings into the tiny space that used to be hers. As we got older, Emily's preferential treatment only became more blatant. She knew she could get away with anything, and she took full advantage of it. One day, I caught her sneaking money from Tom's wallet. "Emily," I hissed. "What are you doing?" She just grinned and pressed a finger to her lips. "Shoo, don't be such a tattletale, Michelle." Later that evening, all hell broke loose when Tom discovered the missing money. $20, he bellowed. "Who took $20 from my wallet?" I saw Emily's eyes widen in panic, but before I could say anything, she blurted out, "I saw Michelle near your room earlier." All eyes turned to me. I didn't," I stammered, but Emily cut me off. "Check her backpack," she suggested, her voice dripping with false concern. To my horror, Tom marched over and yanked open my school bag. And there, tucked into a side pocket, was a $5 bill. "Michelle," Mom gasped. "How could you?" "I didn't take it," I cried, realizing too late what Emily had done. "I swear, it wasn't me." But my protests fell on deaf ears. I was grounded for a month, forced to do extra chores, and lectured endlessly about trust and responsibility. All the while, Emily watched with a smug smile, reveling in her victory. That night, as I lay in my too small bed in my too small room, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, always the scapegoat, always the afterthought. I needed to find a way out. High school became my ticket to freedom. While Emily coasted through on charm and our parents' doting attention, I buried myself in books and extracurriculars. Every A on my report card, every academic achievement was a step closer to independence. The day I received my college acceptance letter was the happiest of my life. Full scholarship, dormitory included. I was getting out. The summer before college, I picked up a job at a local cafe. Every dollar I earned went into a secret savings account. Never again would I be financially dependent on my family. Moving day arrived, and I couldn't pack fast enough. As I lugged my suitcases to the car, Emily lounged in the doorway, smirking. "Have fun at loser college," she drawled. "Try not to bore everyone to death with your nerdiness." I bit back a retort. In a few hours, I'd be free of her taunts. College was everything I'd hoped for and more. For the first time, I was judged on my own merits, not constantly compared to my sister. I threw myself into my classes, determined to make the most of this opportunity. My human resources management program was challenging, but fascinating. I loved learning about organizational behavior, talent acquisition, and conflict resolution. Ironically, my dysfunctional family had given me plenty of real-world experience in those areas. Between classes and studying, I kept my job at a cafe near campus. The work was exhausting, but every paycheck felt like a victory. This was my money, earned by my own efforts. Holidays were awkward. I'd return home to find Emily the center of attention, as always. She was in high school, and apparently excelling in her social life, if not her studies. "Michelle," Mom would say, her voice dripping with false cheer, "why don't you tell us about school? Any boys in your life?" I'd give them the bare minimum of information, counting the hours until I could return to campus. My real life, my real self, was there now. Graduation day arrived before I knew it. As I stood in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I felt a surge of pride. I'd done it. Despite everything, I'd succeeded. My family was there, looking slightly out of place among the celebrating crowds. Emily rolled her eyes at the ceremony. "God, this is boring," she muttered. "Can we go eat now?" I ignored her, posing for photos with my roommates and favorite professors. These were the people who had supported me, who had seen my potential. They were my real family now. Fresh out of college, I landed a job as a human resources manager at a large company. As I scrolled through apartment listings, my heart sank. Even the tiniest studios were way out of my budget. "Michelle," Mom said during one of our infrequent phone calls, "why don't you move back home? Just until you get on your feet. You won't have to pay rent, just help out around the house a bit." Against my better judgment, I agreed. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I saved enough for my own place. I should have known better. From the moment I moved back in, it was like I'd never left. Emily was still the golden child, now in her college, fully paid for by our parents, of course. I, on the other hand, was right back to being Cinderella. "Michelle, can you start dinner? We're starving," Mom would call out the moment I walked in from work. "Michelle, the bathroom needs cleaning," Tom would announce, not bothering to lift a finger himself. I'd come home exhausted from a full day at the office, only to face hours of cooking and cleaning. Meanwhile, Emily lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone and complaining about how hard her life was. I bit my tongue so often I'm surprised it didn't fall off. This wasn't what I'd agreed to, but every time I tried to protest, Mom reminded me that I live here rent-free. Then came the bombshell. Emily, barely into her sophomore year, announced she was getting married. To a guy 10 years older than her, no less. "Isn't it romantic?" she gushed, flashing her enormous diamond ring. "Jason is so successful. He says I don't even need to finish college." I watched in disbelief as our parents fawned over Emily and her fiancé. They threw themselves into wedding planning with gusto, sparing no expense. I couldn't help but wonder if they'd be this generous if it were my wedding. But of course, in their eyes, I was destined to be the spinster daughter, too focused on work to find a man. The wedding was a lavish affair. I stood beside Emily as her bridesmaid, plastering on a fake smile as I watched my parents beam with pride. This was everything they'd ever wanted for their favorite daughter. After a honeymoon in the Maldives, another gift from our parents, Emily and Jason moved into a rented apartment. I thought maybe things would improve at home without Emily's constant presence. I was wrong. A few months later, Emily showed up on our doorstep, glowing with news. "I'm pregnant," she squealed. As my parents erupted in joyous celebration, I felt a knot form in my stomach. Somehow, I knew this would end up complicating my life even further. Sure enough, over the next few months, I was roped into helping Emily prepare for the baby. Shopping trips, doctor's appointments, setting up the nursery, all on top of my job and household chores. When my nephew was born, Emily and Jason were over at our house constantly. More messes for me to clean, more mouths for me to feed. "Isn't it wonderful?" Mom cooed, cradling her grandson. "Our family is growing." I looked around at the chaos, toys strewn about, dishes piled in the sink, my work papers shoved aside to make room for baby gear. This wasn't my family, not really. And this definitely wasn't my life. A year had passed since the birth of Emily's son. I'd settled into a routine, balancing my job with the endless chores at home. It wasn't ideal, but I was making it work. Then came the dinner that would change everything. "Michelle," Mom said, her tone unusually serious. "We need to discuss something. Your sister's moving back home, with Jason and the baby. They can't afford their place anymore." I waited for the other shoe to drop. It didn't take long. "We need you to move out," Tom said bluntly. "By the end of the week." The fork clattered from my hand. "What? But, where am I supposed to go?" "You're a grown woman with a job," Mom said dismissively. "You'll figure it out." Anger, hot and fierce, bubbled up inside me. "Why is it always about Emily?" I exploded. "Why do you always choose her over me?" "Don't be selfish, Michelle," Tom snapped. "Your sister has a family to support. You're alone. You can manage on your own." "Selfish?" I repeated, incredulous. "I've done nothing but sacrifice for this family for years." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Well, we won't be needing your sacrifices anymore. Or your services as a maid, for that matter." In a daze, I packed my belongings. There wasn't much, most of the furniture belonged to my parents. Tears streamed down my face as I lugged my suitcases to my car, but I refused to let them see me break. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Emily's car pulling into the driveway. She gave me a little wave, her expression a mix of triumph and happiness. I found a small apartment across town, barely more than a studio. It was all I could afford on such short notice. As I unpacked my meager belongings, a strange sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in my life, I was truly on my own. Days turned into weeks. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove I could make it on my own. And to my surprise, I found I was happier than I'd been in years. No one to clean up after, no one to cook for, no one's needs to put before my own. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of hard work and dedication. My efforts hadn't gone unnoticed. I was promoted to Chief Recruitment Manager, a position that came with a significant pay bump and a lot more responsibility. I moved to a nicer apartment closer to work, filling it with furniture I'd chosen myself. No hand-me-downs, no compromises. Just my style, my space. It felt like freedom. I'd finally found some peace, away from the constant drama of my family. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. Emily's name flashed on the screen. Michelle, her voice was syrupy sweet. I need a favor. Jason's looking for a new job. I was hoping you could help him out at your company. I sighed. Of course. It wasn't a social call after all. I can look into it, I said cautiously. But I can't promise anything. When Jason's resume landed in my inbox, I did my due diligence. I found a few entry-level positions that matched his qualifications and passed them along. These are beneath me, Jason scoffed when I called to discuss the options. Don't you have anything better? I bit back a retort. These are the positions available that match your experience. Take it or leave it. He left it. A few weeks later, I heard through the office grapevine that Jason had landed a cushy job at our biggest competitor. As head of sales, no less. I nearly choked on my coffee when I heard. How the hell did that happen? I muttered to myself. It didn't take long to find out. Mom let it slip during one of our infrequent phone calls. Oh, your father pulled some strings, she said casually. He knows someone on their board of directors. Isn't it wonderful? Jason's doing so well. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All those years of hard work, of proving myself, and my parents had never once offered to help me. But for Jason, they'd move mountains. I wanted to scream, to confront them about the unfairness of it all. But what would be the point? They'd never see it my way. So I swallowed my anger and said nothing. A month passed. I threw myself into my work, trying to forget about Jason and my family's blatant favoritism. Then came the call that would change everything. Michelle, Jason's voice was low, conspiratorial. I need your help with something. What is it? I asked, wary. I need some information. Customer lists, pricing details. You know, the good stuff. I felt the blood drain from my face. Are you asking me to steal confidential information? Come on, it's not stealing, he cajoled. Just sharing. Between family. That's corporate espionage, Jason. It's illegal. He laughed, as if I'd told a particularly funny joke. No one will know it came from you. I'll make it worth your while. We'll split the commission. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Absolutely not. Don't ever ask me something like this again. Don't be so uptight, he pressed. Think about Emily, about your nephew. Don't you want to help your family? That was the last straw. If you ever contact me about this again, I'm going straight to the police, I snapped. And don't you dare use my sister or nephew to manipulate me. I hung up, my hands shaking with rage. How dare he? But I had a sickening feeling that this was far from over. A week after Jason's disturbing phone call, I was buried in paperwork when my assistant buzzed me. Ms. Carter, your sister and her husband are here to see you. I froze, a chill running down my spine. This wasn't a coincidence. Send them in, I said, my mind racing. Emily bounced in, all smiles and chatter, with Jason following close behind. Surprise! We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd drop by. As they settled into the chairs across from my desk, I discreetly sent a text to our head of security, keep an eye on Jason, my brother-in-law. Suspicious activity possible. So, how have you been? Emily gushed, launching into a monologue about her son's latest achievements. I nodded along, half listening, my attention focused on Jason. He was fidgety, his eyes darting around my office. Suddenly, he stood up. Sorry, where's your restroom? Down the hall to the left, I said, watching him hurry out. The moment the door closed, Emily leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Oh my gosh, Michelle, you'll never believe what happened at the grocery store yesterday. So, I was in line, right? And this lady in front of me had, like, a million coupons. As Emily prattled on about her mundane grocery store adventure, my suspicion grew. She was trying too hard to keep my attention, her story unnecessarily detailed and animated. My hand inched towards the silent alarm button under my desk. And then the cashier called the manager, and you won't believe what he said. Emily continued, her eyes darting to the door and back to me. I pressed the alarm. Within seconds, I heard commotion in the hallway. Emily's eyes widened. What's going on? We rushed out of my office to find chaos. Security guards were wrestling Jason to the ground outside the sales director's office. Scattered papers littered the floor around them. Let go of me, Jason yelled, struggling against the guards. This is a misunderstanding. Emily screamed, rushing towards her husband. What are you doing? Let him go. I stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. The police arrived minutes later, taking statements from everyone involved. I told them everything, Jason's phone call, his request for confidential information, my suspicions about today's visit. The next morning, I was called into the director's office. My palms were sweaty as I knocked on the door, unsure of what to expect. Michelle, the director said, gesturing for me to sit. I want to commend you for your actions yesterday. Your quick thinking and integrity prevented a potentially disastrous breach of our company's security. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job. He nodded approvingly. That's the kind of dedication we value here. In fact, I think it's time we discussed your future with the company. As I left his office an hour later, my head was spinning. A promotion, a raise, and a commendation in my file. It was everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of. But as I sat at my desk, staring at the family photo I still kept despite everything, I couldn't help but wonder, at what cost did this success come? And what would happen next, with my family? The morning after the incident, my phone rang incessantly. I knew who it was, before I even looked at the screen. With a deep breath, I answered. Michelle. Mom's voice was shrill. What have you done? Before I could respond, Tom's voice boomed through the speaker. You need to fix this, Michelle. Now. For the next hour, they berated me, demanding I recant my testimony and take the blame for Jason's actions. Think about your sister, Mom pleaded. Think about your nephew. You're going to ruin their lives. And what about you? Tom chimed in. You're all alone. No husband, no kids. It will be easier for you to bear all this trouble than for Jason. I felt a familiar pressure building in my chest, the weight of their expectations threatening to crush me. But this time, something was different. I was different. No, I said, my voice steady. I won't do it. Jason broke the law. He has to face the consequences. There was a moment of stunned silence before the tirade began anew. You ungrateful child, Mom screeched. After everything we've done for you. That's it, Tom growled. You're no daughter of ours. Don't expect a penny when we're gone. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling oddly light. It was over. Finally, truly over. The next few months were a whirlwind. Jason was charged with trespassing, attempted burglary, and industrial espionage. He lost his job, his reputation in tatters. Emily, miraculously, escaped charges. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove my parents wrong. I didn't need their support or their money. I had myself, and that was enough. News trickled in through mutual acquaintances. Jason left prison, but unable to find work, turned to the bottle. Emily, disillusioned with her fallen prince, began a parade of affairs. The final straw came when Jason caught her in bed with another man, in my parents' house, no less. The ensuing brawl ended with Jason on the street and Emily served with divorce papers. Emily stayed at my parents' house, bringing each of her new lovers there. It wasn't long before they'd had enough, kicking her out just as they'd done to me. When she lost custody of her son, my parents stepped in to raise their grandson. As I heard each piece of news, I waited for the satisfaction to set in, for the vindication I'd always imagined I'd feel. but it never came. Instead, I felt nothing. They weren't my family anymore. Their drama wasn't mine. Years passed. I climbed the corporate ladder, my hard work and integrity paying off in ways I'd never imagined. And then, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, I met him. Mark was everything I'd never known I wanted. Kind, supportive, and completely removed from the toxic world I'd grown up in. When he proposed a year later, I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was small, intimate. Just our closest friends and Mark's family. As I stood there, reciting my vows, I realized I'd finally found what I'd been searching for all along: unconditional love and acceptance. I haven't spoken to my parents or Emily in years. Sometimes I wonder about them, about my nephew. But I don't reach out. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way.
I'm Naomi, and I've always been the black sheep of my family. From the moment I was born, I was a disappointment to my father. He'd been hoping for a boy, and when the doctor announced it's a girl, his face fell. I guess that set the tone for our relationship. My older sister Sarah was the golden child. She was smart, talented, and could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Me? I was just there? Our house was always filled with praise for Sarah's latest accomplishment. Did you hear? Sarah got another A on her math test, or look at this beautiful painting Sarah made. Meanwhile, my report cards were met with indifference, and my crayon drawings ended up in the trash. As I grew older, I learned to fend for myself. I made my own lunches, did my own laundry, and figured out my homework without help. It wasn't ideal, but it made me strong and independent. One day when I was about 12, I discovered something that would change my life. I was hungry after school, and with no one around to make me a snack, I decided to try baking cookies. I followed a recipe I found in one of Mom's old cookbooks, and to my surprise, they turned out pretty good. The next day, I brought some to school. My classmate, Jenny, took a bite and her eyes widened. "Naomi, these are amazing. Did your mom make them?" I shook my head, a small smile forming on my lips. "No, I did." Word spread quickly, and soon kids were asking if I could bring more. For the first time in my life, I felt special. I had found something I was good at, something that made people notice me. When I got home that day, I was bursting with excitement. "Mom, Dad, guess what? I made cookies and everyone at school loved them." Mom barely looked up from her magazine. "That's nice, dear. Just make sure you clean up the kitchen when you're done." Dad frowned. "Cookies? Naomi, you should be focusing on your studies, not wasting time in the kitchen." My heart sank, but I didn't let their lack of enthusiasm dampen my spirit. I had found my passion, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. As the years rolled by, the divide between my sister and me only grew wider. Sarah graduated high school with flying colors and got accepted into a prestigious college. You'd think our parents had won the lottery, the way they carried on. Meanwhile, I was still in high school, my grades decent but unremarkable. But I had found my calling in the kitchen. Every weekend, I'd whip up a storm of cakes, pies, and cookies. The neighbors started placing orders, and soon I had a little business going. "Naomi, honey, Mrs. Rodriguez from next door said one day, savoring a bite of my chocolate cake, 'This is heavenly. You've got a real gift.'" I beamed at the compliment. "Thanks. I'm thinking of going to culinary school after graduation." Her eyes lit up. "Oh, that's wonderful. You'd do so well." But when I shared this dream with my parents, their reactions couldn't have been more different. Mom's face fell. "Culinary school. But that's just cooking." Dad's reaction was even worse. He slammed his fist on the table. "Absolutely not. No daughter of mine is going to waste her life in a kitchen." "But Dad," I protested, "I'm good at it. People love my baking." He scoffed. "Good? So what? You think you can make a living flipping burgers or decorating cakes? Wake up, Naomi. The real world doesn't work like that." Mom chimed in, her voice softer but no less dismissive. "Honey, you need to think about your future. Look at Sarah. She's studying finance, she'll have a real career." Their words stung, but I wasn't ready to give up. I started selling my baked goods at school fairs and to classmates. The response was overwhelming. "Naomi, these cookies are insane," my friend Jake said, mouth full of chocolate chip goodness. "You should open a bakery or something." I grinned, imagining it. My own little shop, filled with the smell of fresh bread and sweet pastries, it seemed like a dream come true. But at home, the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. "What's this?" Dad demanded one day, holding up a flyer for my bake sale. I swallowed hard. It's for school. We're raising money for new computers." He narrowed his eyes. "Don't lie to me, Naomi. I know you've been selling your little treats. This stops now, you hear me? You need to focus on real studies, not this hobby." "But Dad, I'm making good money." "Money," he interrupted. "You call a few dollars for cookies money? Do you know how much your sister makes at her internship? That's real money, Naomi. That's a real future." I bit my lip, fighting back tears. I just thought. "No, you didn't think," he cut me off. "Listen to me carefully. This baking nonsense ends now. You're going to buckle down, get your grades up, and apply to proper colleges. If I hear about one more cake or cookie, so help me, we'll cut you off. No more college fund, no more support. Do you understand?" That night, I cried myself to sleep, my dreams of culinary school crumbling like an overcooked cookie. The next day, I started researching business colleges, my heart heavy but my resolve strengthened. I would find a way to make this work. Somehow, someday, I'd follow my passion. But for now, I had to play by their rules. College flew by in a blur of numbers, spreadsheets, and financial reports. I threw myself into my accounting studies, trying to convince myself that this was the right path. But every time I passed a bakery or caught the scent of fresh bread, my heart ached for what could have been. Finally, degree in hand, I landed a job at a large corporation. My parents were thrilled. I rented a tiny apartment, determined to stand on my own 2 feet. But as I sat at my desk, day after day, crunching numbers and filing reports, I felt my spirit slowly dying. One evening, unable to take it anymore, I dug out my old recipe book. The pages were worn, stained with butter and flour, reminders of happier times. I whipped up a batch of cupcakes, losing myself in the familiar rhythms of mixing and baking. The next day, I brought them to work. The response was immediate and overwhelming. "Oh my God, Naomi, these are amazing," my coworker Lisa exclaimed. "Where did you buy them?" I hesitated, then admitted, "Actually, I made them." Word spread quickly. Soon, people were asking if I could make cakes for their birthdays, their kids' parties, even their weddings. I started small, just a few orders on weekends, but soon I was spending every free moment in the kitchen. My tiny apartment was constantly filled with the aroma of vanilla and chocolate. The turning point came when our company's anniversary rolled around. The director himself approached me. "Naomi, I hear you're quite the baker," he said. "How would you feel about making the cake for our anniversary party?" My heart raced. This was a huge opportunity and a huge risk, but I couldn't say no. The day of the party arrived. I wheeled in a massive cake, decorated with the company logo and intricate sugar flowers. As I unveiled it, the room fell silent. Then the director broke into a huge grin. "This is incredible," he turned to the crowd. "Everyone, give it up for Naomi, our resident accounting wizard and apparently, master pastry chef." The room erupted in applause. The director actually hugged me, whispering, "You're wasted in accounting, my dear. This is your true calling." His words stuck with me. Over the next few months, as the orders kept pouring in, I realized I had a decision to make. I was working 2 full-time jobs, accountant by day, baker by night. Something had to give. One sleepless night, covered in flour and surrounded by orders, I made my choice. The next day, I handed in my resignation. But why?" my supervisor sputtered. "You're one of our best." I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I found my true passion," I said simply. I rented a small commercial kitchen and threw myself into my new business. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. There were nights I stayed up until dawn, filling orders, days when I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake. But slowly, surely, my little bakery grew. I hired my first employee, then my second. We moved to a bigger space. My cakes and pastries became known throughout the city. Through it all, I kept it a secret from my parents. As far as they knew, I was still a successful accountant, climbing the corporate ladder. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment to tell them the truth. But deep down, I knew I was just afraid. Afraid of their disappointment, their anger, their rejection. As my bakery business grew, I knew I needed to step up my game. I dove headfirst into the world of modern marketing, determined to make my little shop stand out in a crowded market. I created social media accounts for the bakery, posting mouth-watering photos of my creations daily, but I was always careful to keep myself out of the frame. No selfies, no Meet the Baker posts. Just cakes, cookies, and pastries in all their glory. Despite my paranoia, the business thrived. I partnered with a local courier service for deliveries, extending our reach across the city. I implemented a loyalty program, offering discounts to repeat customers. And then came my masterstroke Sweet Tooth Saturdays. Once a month, we'd open our doors and offer free samples to anyone who walked in. The first time, I was a nervous wreck. What if no one comes? I fretted to Jess. She rolled her eyes. Boss, have you tasted your own stuff? They'll be lining up around the block. She was right. By noon, we had a queue stretching down the street. As I watched people's faces light up with each bite, I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the ovens. Our popularity skyrocketed. Soon we were catering high-profile events, supplying desserts to upscale restaurants, even shipping our signature cookies nationwide. And with success came money. More money than I'd ever imagined I'd make just baking cookies, as my dad would say. Before I knew it, my income had surpassed my sister's bank salary. I started helping my parents out, always under the guise of my successful accounting career. When their roof needed replacing, I footed the bill. When they mentioned wanting to see Europe, I surprised them with tickets. "Oh, Naomi, you shouldn't have," Mom said, but her eyes sparkled with excitement. While I was building my business and helping our parents, Sarah was living it up. She still lived at home, spending her entire paycheck on designer clothes, fancy gadgets, and her latest obsession, self-care. But none of that mattered to my parents. In their eyes, Sarah was still the star. "Did you hear about Sarah's promotion?" Mom would say, beaming. Vice president of her department at only 28. I'd force a smile. "That's great, Sarah. Congrats." All the while, I was running a successful business, employing a dozen people, bringing joy to hundreds of customers every day. But in this house, that counted for nothing. That day started like any other at Sweet Dreams Bakery. I was in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a wedding cake, when Jess burst in, waving an order form. "Boss, you're not gonna believe this," she said, her eyes wide. I wiped my hands on my apron. "What's up?" "We just got an order for a birthday cake. Delivery address is..." She paused for dramatic effect. "Your parents' house." I felt like I'd been doused with ice water. "What? Are you sure?" She nodded, handing me the form. There it was, in black and white. My childhood address, my mother's name, even a note specifying it was for her birthday. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then, slowly, a plan began to form in my mind. "Jess," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "clear my schedule. This cake is going to be my masterpiece." For the next week, I poured every ounce of my skill and love into that cake. 3 tiers of Mom's favorite flavors, decorated with hand-piped flowers and delicate sugar sculptures. It was, without a doubt, the best work I'd ever done. As I put the final touches on it, I imagined the scene: my parents' awe as they saw the cake, their pride when I revealed I'd made it, the joy of finally being able to share my true self with them. The day of the party arrived. I showed up early, a small gift in hand to maintain my cover. The house was bustling with relatives I hadn't seen in years. "Naomi," Aunt Clara exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. "Look at you, all grown up. Still crunching numbers." I nodded, the familiar lie sticking in my throat. "Yep, still at it." I couldn't wait for my cake from the bakery, and then the doorbell rang. Mom answered it, and there was our delivery guy, holding the distinctive Sweet Dreams bakery box. "Special delivery for the birthday girl," he announced cheerfully. A hush fell over the gathering as Mom carried the box to the dining room table. She lifted the lid. There were gasps and murmurs of appreciation as the cake was revealed in all its glory. I stood there, my heart pounding, waiting for the right moment to speak up. But before I could open my mouth, Dad cleared his throat. "Before we celebrate," he said, his voice unusually serious, "we have something we need to address." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to my parents, who were now wearing identical expressions of, "Was that discussed?" "We recently discovered something," Mom continued, her voice cold. "A secret that's been kept from us." The silence in the room was deafening as my parents' words hung in the air. I stood there, frozen, as my father's voice, dripping with disdain, shattered the life I'd built. "Can you believe it?" he said, addressing the room full of relatives. His finger pointed at me accusingly. "Our Naomi here has been lying to us all this time. She's not an accountant, she's a pastry chef." He spat the words out like they were poison. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, but no words came out. This couldn't be happening. Dad continued, his face red with anger. "We always dreamed our daughters would achieve real success, become respected members of society." He gestured towards Sarah, "Like your sister here, vice president at her age. That's something to be proud of." Sarah shifted uncomfortably, not meeting my eyes. "But you," Mom said, her gaze boring into me. "We raised you, gave you every opportunity, and this is how you repay us, by becoming an ordinary cook." The word ordinary stung more than I could have imagined. Didn't they understand? Couldn't they see what I'd built? Suddenly, Dad strode over to the table where my cake sat. With one swift motion, he flipped the box over. I watched in horror as my creation, the masterpiece I'd poured my heart into, crashed to the floor in a mess of icing and sponge. A collective gasp went up from the guests. Dad let out a harsh laugh. "We're not eating this stuff," he sneered. "It's beneath us." Mom nodded in agreement. "Naomi, you've shown us that you're unworthy to be among respectable people. You've disobeyed us for the last time." Dad's next words hit me like a physical blow. "We hereby disown you. You're no longer our daughter." I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. I looked around the room, desperately seeking an ally, someone to stand up for me. But I was met with averted gazes and uncomfortable shuffles. Aunt Clara, who had hugged me so warmly earlier, now whispered to Uncle Joe, "I always knew that girl was trouble." Others nodded in agreement. The room that had moments ago been filled with festive cheer now felt cold and hostile. "Leave," Mom said, her voice ice cold. "Leave now and don't ever contact us again." I stood there, rooted to the spot, tears streaming down my face. How could they do this? How could they dismiss everything I'd achieved, everything I was, so cruelly? "Didn't you hear your mother?" Dad barked. "Get out." Somehow I found the strength to move. I turned and walked towards the door, my vision blurred by tears. As I reached for the handle, I heard Sarah's voice, tiny and unsure. "Mom, Dad, maybe we should." But her words were cut off as the door closed behind me. I stumbled down the front steps, the same steps I'd climbed countless times as a child, but now they felt foreign and unwelcoming. I made it to my car before the sobs overtook me. As I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of the family I'd just lost, I felt something inside me break. The dream I'd held onto for so long of finally gaining my parents' approval, of them understanding and appreciating who I truly was, had shattered like my cake on the dining room floor. I don't know how long I sat there, crying until I had no tears left. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the neighborhood I'd grown up in, I knew one thing for certain: I could never come back here again. The days following the disastrous birthday party passed in a blur. I moved like a ghost, barely eating, hardly sleeping. The bakery kept running thanks to my incredible staff, but I was just going through the motions. Gradually, as the shock wore off, I threw myself into work with renewed vigor. If my family couldn't appreciate my passion, I'd show the rest of the world just how extraordinary an ordinary cook could be. The bakery flourished. We expanded to a second location, then a third. Magazine features, TV spots, a cookbook deal. Success came in waves, and I rode each one with determination. I bought a beautiful apartment, my own little sanctuary in the city. 2 years after the fallout, I met Jack. He was kind, supportive, and thought my cakes were the best thing since, well, sliced bread. When he proposed a year later, I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was small but perfect. As I looked around at the smiling faces of friends and chosen family, I realized I didn't miss my blood relatives at all. These people, my employees, my friends, my husband, they were my real family now. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The bakery continued to thrive, and Jack and I built a happy life together. I had everything I'd ever wanted except, perhaps, closure. That changed on a Tuesday afternoon, 5 years after the birthday party incident. I was in my office reviewing plans for our newest location when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. Hello. Naomi, my mother's voice, tentative but unmistakable. Don't hang up, please. We need to talk. What followed was a barrage of information. The bank where Sarah worked had lost its license, mass layoffs, Sarah unemployed for months, they needed help. Before I could process this, my father's voice cut in. You need to give Sarah a job at your bakery. As the director, Sarah has actual business experience. She should run things and you can just be one of the bakers. The absurdity of it all hit me then. 5 years of silence, and this was why they reached out. A cold laugh escaped me. Let me get this straight. You disown me, throw me out, and now you're demanding I give up my business to Sarah. We gave you life, Dad bellowed. We raised you. You owe us. Something snapped inside me then. All the pain, all the anger I'd suppressed for years came rushing out. I owe you nothing, I said, my voice steady and cold. You made your choice 5 years ago. I'm not your daughter, remember? I'm just an ordinary cook who's beneath you. I certainly won't be helping you or Sarah. Goodbye. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. For a moment I just sat there, letting the reality of what just happened sink in. Then, slowly, a smile spread across my face. I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had been lifted. I owed them nothing. I was free. Just when I thought I had closed the book on my family saga, life threw me another curveball. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when my phone rang, displaying a number I hadn't seen in years. Sarah's number. With a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, I answered. Hello. Naomi, Sarah's voice was soft, hesitant. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I took a deep breath. It's okay, Sarah. What's going on? What followed was a conversation that would change everything. Sarah apologized profusely for our parents' behavior, both recently and 5 years ago. I had no idea they called you asking for a job, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I would never have asked for that. I'm so sorry, Naomi. I felt a knot in my chest begin to loosen. Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot. She went on to explain how losing her job had been a wake-up call. I realized I'd been living someone else's dream all this time. Banking, finance, it was never what I wanted. It was always Mom and Dad's vision for me. I listened, barely breathing, as my sister poured out her heart. Seeing you follow your passion, build this amazing business, it inspired me, Naomi. I've decided to change my life. I've enrolled in interior design courses. I want to create, to make beautiful spaces. I want to be true to myself, like you've been. Tears welled up in my eyes. All these years I'd thought Sarah was the golden child, living her best life. I never imagined she might be struggling too. That's wonderful, Sarah, I managed to say. I'm happy for you. There was a pause, then Sarah's voice came again, thick with emotion. I'm proud of you, Naomi. You stood up for yourself, followed your dreams despite everything. You're living the life you want, and that's amazing. I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. Years of pent-up emotion, the hurt, the anger, but also the longing for my sister came pouring out. We talked for hours, catching up on lost time, sharing our hopes and fears. As the conversation wound down, Sarah hesitantly suggested, maybe we could meet up sometime, just to talk, share news, support each other. I found myself nodding, even though she couldn't see me. I'd like that, Sarah. I'd like that a lot. Over the next few months, Sarah and I met regularly. We shared coffee and pastries from my bakery, of course, laughed over old memories, and supported each other through the challenges of our respective careers. Sarah's interior design business was taking off, and I couldn't have been prouder. As for our parents, we heard through the grapevine that they'd disowned Sarah too when she quit banking. They told anyone who would listen that their daughters had disappointed them, one an ordinary cook, the other a frivolous decorator. But Sarah and I knew the truth. We were living our dreams, building successful careers, doing what we loved. We had found our own paths to happiness and fulfillment. One day, as Sarah and I were having our weekly catch-up at my bakery, she looked around at the bustling shop, then back at me with a smile. "You know," she said, "I think we turned out pretty great, all things considered." I laughed, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the ovens. "Yeah," I agreed, "I think we did." As I watched my sister sketch design ideas on a napkin, surrounded by the sweet aroma of fresh pastries and the chatter of happy customers, I felt a profound sense of contentment. This was my life, messy, challenging, but ultimately sweet. I had fought for my dreams, lost some battles, but ultimately won the war. I'm Kimberly, and I was born into what you'd call an ordinary family. My parents made good money, but they weren't exactly rolling in it. I had an older brother, 5 years my senior, and let me tell you, he was the golden child. Our parents sent my brother to some fancy private school with all the bells and whistles. Meanwhile, I was shuffled off to the local public school. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't terrible, but the difference was night and day. I remember this one time when I was about 8. I'd just finished watching a music video of this amazing singer, and I was so inspired. I ran to my mom, all excited, and said, "Mom, can I take singing lessons, please?" She just looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Singing lessons? Kimberly, don't be ridiculous. That's just a silly hobby. You need to focus on getting a real job when you grow up." My dad chimed in, "Your brother's the smart one in the family. You'll need to work with your hands, sweetie. No use wasting money on singing lessons." So I started looking up vocal lessons online. I'd practice in my room, trying to keep it down so my parents wouldn't complain. "Kimberly, stop that racket" became a common phrase in our house. Things might have stayed that way if it wasn't for my Aunt Sarah. She was my mom's sister, didn't have any kids of her own. She was a dentist, made good money, and for some reason she seemed to actually like hanging out with me. One day, she caught me singing in my room. I was so embarrassed, but she just smiled. "Kimberly, that was beautiful," she said. "Why didn't you tell me you could sing?" I shrugged, feeling my cheeks burn. Mom and Dad say it's silly. Aunt Sarah's face did this weird thing like she was trying not to frown. "Well, I think it's wonderful. How about we get you some proper lessons?" From that day on, everything changed. Aunt Sarah became my secret weapon. She bought me a synthesizer, and we'd spend hours learning songs together. It was like having a whole new world open up to me. When my parents found out about the lessons, they weren't thrilled. Mom even had the nerve to tell Aunt Sarah, "You should be giving that money to our son instead." But Aunt Sarah? She just smiled that calm smile of hers and said, "I think Kimberly has a real talent. I'm happy to nurture it." That was the first time anyone had ever stood up for me like that. It made me feel seen. Like maybe I wasn't just the family disappointment after all. While I was scraping by with my singing lessons, my brother was living the high life. One day he came home all excited about hockey. "Mom, Dad, I want to play hockey," he announced at dinner. I nearly choked on my peas. Last month it was tennis. The month before that, American football. And don't even get me started on his brief rugby phase. But did our parents hesitate? Nope. Dad just nodded and said, "Sure, son, we'll sign you up tomorrow." To no one's surprise, hockey didn't stick either. Neither did any of the other sports. My brother bounced from one activity to another like a pinball, never really excelling at anything. Then came the esports phase. Oh boy. I need a gaming computer, he announced one day. Top of the line. And I need my own room for training and competitions. I waited for my parents to finally put their foot down. But nope. They just nodded along like bobbleheads. Of course, honey, Mom cooed. We'll set everything up for you. And they did. They converted the guest room into his personal gaming paradise. The computer they bought him cost more than my entire wardrobe. Meanwhile, I was still sharing a room with my cousin's hand-me-down synthesizer. The worst part was the wall of fame in our living room. It was this massive display of all my brother's achievements. I use that term loosely. There were participation certificates from every sport he'd quit, academic awards from his fancy private school, even a best smile certificate from his third-grade yearbook. And me? Not a single spot on that wall. Not even a tiny corner for my straight A's or the singing competition I'd won at school. Things really came to a head when it was time for college. My brother, of course, got into some Ivy League school. Mom and Dad were over the moon. They paid for everything: tuition, a fancy apartment off campus, a new car. The works. 4 years flew by. I focused on my singing, on school, on anything to keep my mind off the unfairness of it all. Aunt Sarah was my rock through it all, always there with a word of encouragement or a new song to learn. Then, one sunny afternoon, my brother burst through the front door. He had this girl with him, all giggly and hanging off his arm. "Mom," Daddy shouted, "I've got news." They came running, of course, always at his beck and call. "This is Melissa," he said, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "We got married last week. She's moving in with us." I thought Mom was going to faint from happiness. Dad started talking about clearing out more space, maybe converting the attic. As everyone fussed over the happy couple, I slipped away to my room. I had a bad feeling about what was coming next, and boy was I right. The next month was like living in a bizarre parallel universe. Mom and Dad were all over my brother and his new wife, Melissa. They were redecorating his room, buying new furniture, even talking about building an extension to the house. Meanwhile, I was invisible. More than usual, I mean. I tried to focus on my future. I'd graduated high school with honors, not that anyone noticed, and was eyeing this small college with a decent vocal program. It wasn't fancy, but it was something. I knew Mom and Dad had been saving for my college fund. It wasn't much, but it would cover the basics. Or so I thought. One morning, about a month after the happy couple moved in, Mom and Dad called me into the living room. I should have known something was up when I saw their faces. "Kimberly," Dad started, his voice oddly formal. "We need to talk about your future. We've decided to use your college fund to cover your living expenses for the past 18 years. I blinked, sure I'd heard wrong. "What?" "You're an adult now," Dad continued, not meeting my eyes. "It's time you started paying your own way." The room started to spin. But what about college? I was counting on that money. Mom's face hardened. "Your brother is married now. He needs more space and money for his family. We're giving him your room." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So what? I'm just supposed to leave? Where am I supposed to go?" "You'll need to find a job and your own place to live," Dad said, like he was discussing the weather. "You won't be able to afford college without money." Something inside me snapped. For the first time in my life, I felt real, burning anger towards my parents. "You can't do this. I'm your daughter. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home too." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Mom stormed out of the room. I thought that was it, that maybe they'd reconsider. But she came back with a suitcase. "Fine," she spat. "If you won't leave, I'll pack for you." She started grabbing my things, throwing them haphazardly into the suitcase. I stood there, frozen in shock. That's when I noticed my brother and Melissa standing in the doorway, watching the whole scene with smug smiles on their faces. Something in me broke. This wasn't my family. These weren't the people who were supposed to love and support me. I pushed past Mom and started packing my own things. I grabbed my clothes, my few pieces of jewelry, and most importantly, the music books and recordings Aunt Sarah had given me over the years. Nobody said a word as I packed. Nobody tried to stop me. And when I walked out the front door, dragging my suitcase behind me, nobody called me back. I found myself on Aunt Sarah's doorstep, my whole life packed into one measly suitcase. When she opened the door and saw my tear-stained face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into a hug and said, "Oh, Kimberly, come in, sweetheart." That night, over a cup of hot cocoa, I spilled everything. Aunt Sarah listened, her face growing darker with each word. When I finished, she took my hand and squeezed it tight. "You're staying here," she said firmly, "and tomorrow we're going to figure out your future." I slept better that night than I had in years, knowing I was finally somewhere I was wanted. The next morning, Aunt Sarah dropped a bombshell on me. "I'm paying for your college," she announced over breakfast. "I've been saving for years, hoping to help you chase your dreams. This is what that money is for." We spent the next few weeks researching colleges. Aunt Sarah suggested we look into programs that combined acting and singing. "You've got a gift, Kimberly," she said. "Let's find somewhere that'll help you shine." We finally settled on a performing arts college in a city a few hours away. It had an amazing reputation and offered exactly the kind of training I'd always dreamed of. When it came time for the entrance exams, Aunt Sarah took time off work and drove me there herself. I sang my heart out, poured every ounce of emotion into my performance piece. When I finished, the panel of judges was silent for a moment. Then they broke into applause. A week later, I got the acceptance letter. I was in. I threw myself into my studies. Every class, every rehearsal, every late-night practice session, I gave it my all. I signed up for every singing competition I could find, performed in every amateur theater production that would have me. If there was a part in a musical, no matter how small, I was there, auditioning my heart out. Before I knew it, 4 years had flown by. I graduated with honors, my final showcase performance earning a standing ovation. And that's when things really took off. A rep from a big musical theater studio was in the audience that night. He approached me after the show, talking fast about potential and opportunities. Next thing I knew, I was signing a contract with one of the biggest names in the business. Suddenly, I wasn't just performing in college productions or local theaters. I was on real stages, in front of real audiences, playing lead roles in honest-to-God professional musicals. It was terrifying and exhilarating and everything I'd ever wanted. Through it all, Aunt Sarah was my rock. She came to every performance she could, always sitting in the front row, always the first one on her feet for a standing ovation. We'd go for late-night pancakes after each show, and she'd gush about every little detail of my performance. Looking at her beaming face across the table, I realized something. This woman, who had no obligation to me beyond being my mother's sister, had given me more love and support than my own parents ever had. She wasn't just my aunt anymore. She was the mom I'd always wished I had. Life was going great. I had just landed a lead role in a new musical that was generating serious buzz. One afternoon, I dropped by Aunt Sarah's place, bursting with excitement about my plans and prospects. "Aunt Sarah, you won't believe what's happening," I gushed, detailing my upcoming projects and dreams. She listened with that warm smile of hers, but as I was getting ready to leave, she dropped a bombshell. "Kimberly," she said gently, "you've grown into such a wonderful young woman. Don't you think it's time to reconcile with your parents? They're still your family, dear." I wanted to argue, but the hopeful look in her eyes stopped me. After everything she'd done for me, how could I refuse? "Okay," I said reluctantly. "I'll try." The next day, I found myself standing on my parents' doorstep, feeling like a stranger. Mom answered, her eyes widening in surprise. "Kimberly," she said, like she wasn't sure it was really me. "Hi, Mom," I replied, forcing a smile. "Can I come in?" They let me stay, but it was clear I wasn't welcome. The house felt different, colder somehow, and get this, my brother was still living there. Apparently his wife had been kicked out. Mom grumbled something about her playing video games all day and refusing to help around the house or get a job. For days I endured their frosty silence and disapproving looks. I was about ready to call it quits when my brother cornered me in the kitchen. "So," he sneered, "still chasing that silly singing dream?" Let me guess, you're a star in some dingy bar now. Something in me snapped. I stood up straight, looked him in the eye and said, "Actually, I'm the lead singer in several successful musicals. And I'm doing quite well for myself, thank you." You should have seen their faces. It was like someone had flipped a switch. Suddenly, Mom and Dad couldn't stop asking questions. "Musicals?" "Really?" Dad pressed. "How much do you make?" I tried to leave, but Mom practically blocked the door. "You must be making good money," she insisted. "How much is your contract worth?" "That's confidential," I said, trying to edge past her. Dad's face hardened. "Now listen here, young lady. After everything we've done for you, you owe us. We're your parents. You're obligated to help us and your brother." And just like that, I was 18 again, standing in the same house being told I wasn't worth investing in. But this time, I wasn't that scared, insecure girl anymore. "I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice steady. "You kicked me out, remember? Told me I wasn't worth supporting. Well, guess what? I made it without you, and I don't need you now." I headed straight to Aunt Sarah's house. She took one look at my face and opened her arms. As I hugged her, I knew this was my real family. This was home. Life has a cruel way of pulling the rug out from under you just when things seem to be going well. I was riding high on my success, performing in sold-out shows night after night, when I got the call that changed everything. Aunt Sarah had cancer. The world seemed to stop spinning. I wanted to drop everything and rush to her side, but she insisted I keep performing. "Your dreams are my dreams too," she told me over the phone, her voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. "Don't you dare give them up for me." So I kept touring, but every free moment I had, I spent with her. We'd sit in her garden, talking about everything and nothing. I tried to memorize every detail of her face, the sound of her laugh, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. But cancer is a merciless enemy. Despite the treatments, despite our hopes and prayers, Aunt Sarah's condition worsened rapidly. And then, one day, while I was in the middle of a tour, I got the call I'd been dreading. Aunt Sarah was gone. I was lucky, if you can call anything about this situation lucky, that I had a few days break between shows. I caught the first flight home, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed in a vice. As soon as the funeral was over, I had to fly back. The show must go on, as they say. But every performance felt hollow now. I sang the notes, hit the marks, but my heart wasn't in it. How could it be, when it was shattered into a million pieces? When the tour finally ended, I returned home, exhausted and grieving. That's when I got a call from a notary. Apparently Aunt Sarah had left a will, and I needed to come in to discuss it. I went to the notary's office, not really caring about what Aunt Sarah might have left me. Nothing could replace her. But when the notary started reading the will, I couldn't believe my ears. Aunt Sarah had left me everything. Her house, her savings, all of it. I broke down crying right there in the notary's office. In the following days, I moved into Aunt Sarah's house. I was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, I could move forward when my past came knocking literally. One afternoon there was a pounding on the door. I opened it to find my brother standing there, looking disheveled and desperate. "I need money," he blurted out before I could even say hello. "My wife's pregnant, and I left Mom and Dad. They've been driving me crazy with their nagging and criticizing. You've got to help me, Kimmy." I stood there, stunned. After everything that had happened, this was how he approached me. "Why don't you get a job?" I suggested, trying to keep my voice level. His face contorted in disgust. "A job? I don't need a job, I need money. You've got plenty now, don't you? That old lady left you everything." That old lady comment made my blood boil. That old lady was more family to me than you ever were, I spat. "And no, I won't give you money." His eyes narrowed. "You tricked her, didn't you? Manipulated that senile old woman into giving you everything. You're nothing but a thief. I'll take you to court, you'll see." Something in me snapped. All the grief, all the anger I'd been holding in came rushing out. "Get out," I snarled. "Get out of my house right now. You want to take me to court? Go ahead. Try explaining to a judge how the sister you abandoned deserves your handouts. Go on, get out." I slammed the door in his face, my whole body shaking. As I leaned against the closed door, I realized something. This house, this inheritance, it wasn't just a gift. It was Aunt Sarah's final act of love, her way of protecting me even after she was gone. Just when I thought the drama with my brother was over, my phone rang. It was my parents. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the green button. Kimberly, my mother's voice came through, sickly sweet. We heard about the inheritance. Don't you think you should share some of that with your family? After all, Sarah was our relative too. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious right now? I asked, my voice ice cold. Now, Kimberly, my mother cooed, we're just saying, family should help family. You've got so much now. Surely you can spare some for us. That was it. The last straw. Family, I spat. You want to talk about family? Where was your sense of family when you kicked me out? When you told me I wasn't worth investing in? When you chose my brother over me every single time? There was silence on the other end. Let me remind you of something, I continued, my voice shaking with anger. Aunt Sarah left me everything because she believed in me when you didn't. She supported me when you abandoned me. You don't get to be family now that it's convenient for you. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. Then my father's voice, cold and hard. You ungrateful little rubbish. After everything we've done for you. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt lighter. Like I'd finally said everything I'd been holding in for years. But it wasn't over. Far from it. The next day I started seeing posts on social media. My parents were on a warpath, posting long, teary-eyed statuses about how their daughter had stolen their sister's inheritance. How I was a manipulative thief who couldn't even be bothered to organize a proper funeral for my aunt. It was all lies, of course. The funeral had been beautiful, exactly as Aunt Sarah would have wanted. But the truth didn't matter to them. They were out for blood. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly in my inbox, calling me horrible names. Old acquaintances left nasty comments on my photos. It felt like the whole world was turning against me. Every day brought new threats, new insults. My parents created fake profiles to harass me when I blocked their main accounts. My brother joined in, spinning wild tales about how I'd tricked a senile old woman out of her money. Then I heard through the grapevine that they were planning to sue me. My brother, my parents, they were all looking for lawyers to contest the will. For a moment, panic set in. What if they won? What if they took away this last gift from Aunt Sarah? I hired a lawyer of my own, just in case. But it turned out I didn't need to worry. My lawyer smiled when I told him about the threats of a lawsuit. They don't have a leg to stand on, he assured me. The will is ironclad. Your aunt was of sound mind when she made it, and she was clear about her wishes. They can try to sue, but they'll lose. And they'll lose badly. Hearing that was like a weight lifting off my shoulders. The law was on my side. Aunt Sarah's wishes would be respected. The harassment didn't stop overnight, but knowing I was in the right gave me strength. I started blocking accounts, reporting the worst offenders for harassment. Slowly but surely, the tide of public opinion started to turn. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of spotlights, standing ovations, and dreams come true. I had become the successful musical actress Aunt Sarah always knew I could be. My face graced billboards, my voice filled theaters, and I even found myself on TV, still pinching myself to make sure it wasn't all a dream. Life was good. Really good. I was touring internationally, singing my heart out on stages I'd only ever imagined. Every performance felt like a tribute to Aunt Sarah, a way to honor her belief in me. Then came the night that changed everything, again. I was back in my home state for a series of shows. It was a sold-out performance, the energy in the theater electric. As I stood center stage, pouring my soul into a heart-wrenching ballad, the entire audience holding their breath, it happened. 2 figures stood up abruptly, unfurling a large, hastily made poster. Even from the stage, I could make out the words, "Kimberly stole our money." My heart stopped. I'd recognize those voices anywhere. My parents. "She's a thief," my father bellowed. "She manipulated her aunt and stole our inheritance." The spell of the performance shattered. Whispers rippled through the audience, growing into a confused murmur. My co-stars froze, unsure what to do. I stood there, spotlight burning into me, feeling like that scared 18-year-old girl all over again. But only for a moment. As security rushed to remove my parents, as the stage manager frantically tried to regain control, something inside me snapped into place. This was my stage, my life, my moment. I stepped forward, my voice cutting through the chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this interruption. Unfortunately, those people are my estranged parents who have been harassing me for years. But you know what? Their actions can't touch me anymore. Because every time I step on this stage, I'm living my dream, and no one can take that away from me. The theater fell silent. Then, slowly, applause began to build. It grew and grew until it was a roar, drowning out my parents' continued shouts as they were escorted out. We finished the show, and it was one of the best performances of my life. Every note, every step felt like an act of defiance, a declaration of my right to be there. The next morning I called my lawyer. Enough was enough. It was time to end this, once and for all. We went to court armed with years of evidence, social media posts, threatening messages, eyewitness accounts of their disruption. The case was clear-cut. The judge issued a restraining order against my parents, legally barring them from contacting me or coming near my performances. In the years that followed, my career soared to new heights. I traveled the world, performing in cities I'd only ever dreamed of visiting. Every new stage, every new audience was a thrill. My parents and brother became distant memories, faces I might pass on the street without a second glance. They were no longer a part of my story. Instead, I built a new family. Fellow performers, friends who stuck by me through thick and thin, fans whose lives I touched with my music, and at the center of it all, the memory of a woman who saw a spark in a young girl and did everything she could to help it blaze into a fire.
I guess you could say I had a pretty normal childhood, at least on the surface. Mom and Dad both worked office jobs, nothing fancy, but enough to keep us comfortable in our little suburban house. I was born first, and 2 years later, my sister Sophia came along. That's when everything changed, though I didn't realize it at the time. I remember the day Sophia started school. Mom was bustling around the kitchen, humming to herself as she packed Sophia's lunch. "Look, sweetie," she cooed, holding up a heart-shaped sandwich. "And I put a special note in there for you too." Sophia giggled, her pigtails bouncing as she admired her fancy lunch. I glanced down at my own lunchbox, filled with yesterday's leftovers, and felt a twinge in my stomach. "Mom," I said hesitantly, "can I have a heart sandwich too?" She barely looked at me. "Oh, Evelyn, don't be silly. You're too old for that now. Besides, we're out of bread." I wanted to point out that she'd just used bread for Sophia's lunch, but I kept quiet. It wasn't worth the argument. That was just the beginning. As we grew older, the pattern became clearer. Every time Sophia had a school event, Mom was front and center, camera in hand, cheering louder than any other parent. But when it came to my stuff, half the time, she didn't even show up. One day, I was scrolling through Mom's Facebook page when I noticed something weird. It was like a shrine to Sophia, photos of her at dance recitals, holding up spelling bee trophies, posing in new outfits. I had to scroll for ages before I found a picture of myself, and even then, I was half cropped out, blurry in the background. "Mom," I called out, my voice shaking a little. "How come there are so many pictures of Sophia on your page, but hardly any of me?" She glanced over, frowning slightly. "Oh, don't be so sensitive, Evelyn. Sophia's just more photogenic, that's all." I felt like I'd been slapped. More photogenic? Was that code for prettier? For better? Dad must have noticed something was up, because that evening, he surprised me with an ice cream trip. "Just you and me, kiddo," he said, ruffling my hair. "What flavor do you want?" For a while, these little outings with Dad were my lifeline. He'd bring me small gifts, or take me for drives, just the two of us. As the years rolled by, Dad's attempts to even things out became fewer and farther between. I'd catch him sometimes, watching Mom fuss over Sophia with this defeated look in his eyes. It was like he'd given up, you know? After that, things got even worse. Mom's favoritism went into overdrive, and Dad, well, he just checked out. I remember the day Sophia announced she wanted to learn piano. Mom's eyes lit up like it was Christmas. "Oh, darling, that's wonderful," she gushed. "We'll get you the best tutor in town." Next thing I knew, there was a shiny grand piano in our living room, and Sophia was having lessons twice a week. A few days later, I worked up the courage to ask for some new art supplies. My old ones were practically falling apart. "Art supplies?" Mom scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Evelyn, do you have any idea how expensive Sophia's piano lessons are? We can't afford to indulge every little whim." I felt my cheeks burning. "It's not a whim, Mom. I've been into art for years." "Well, maybe you should find a cheaper hobby," she snapped. I retreated to my room, fighting back tears. It wasn't fair. Nothing about this was fair. The differences extended to everything, even our clothes. Sophia's closet looked like a boutique, all designer labels and trendy pieces. Meanwhile, I was stuck with hand-me-downs and whatever I could find on clearance. One day, as I was rifling through a bin of marked-down shirts, Sophia appeared at my side. "Hey, Ev," she said softly. "I got some birthday money from Grandma. Want to split it and get you something nice?" I looked at her, surprised. "You don't have to do that, soft." She shrugged. "I want to. Besides, that green sweater you've been eyeing would look way better on you than me." That was Sophia for you. Despite everything, she was genuinely kind. It wasn't her fault Mom played favorites, and I couldn't bring myself to resent her for it. In fact, as we got older, Sophia and I grew closer. We'd stay up late, whispering about Mom's weird behavior. "I don't get it," Sophia confessed one night. "Why does she treat us so differently?" I shook my head. "I wish I knew, Sophia. I really wish I knew." There were times when Sophia would stand up for me, too. Like when Mom criticized my grades, conveniently forgetting that I was taking advanced classes. "Mom, lay off," Sophia snapped. "Evelyn's working her butt off. You should be proud." Mom looked shocked, then muttered something about Sophia being too soft-hearted. It was moments like these that kept me going. Knowing that at least my sister saw me, really saw me, made the rest of it a little more bearable. Another bright spot in all this mess was my grandparents, Eleanor and George. Every visit to their cozy little house felt like stepping into a different world, one where I actually mattered. Their walls told a different story than Mom's Facebook page. Photos of Sophia and me hung side by side, our gap-toothed grins immortalized in matching frames. One afternoon, as I helped Grandma in the kitchen, I couldn't help but ask, "How come you have so many pictures of me, Grandma?" "Mom barely has any." Grandma's hand stilled on the dough she was kneading. "Oh, sweetie," she sighed. "Your mother, well, she's always been a bit particular. But don't you ever think that means you're any less special?" Meanwhile, Grandpa George's workshop became my sanctuary. The smell of sawdust and varnish, the quiet whir of his lathe, it all felt more like home than my actual house did. Hours would fly by as he taught me to sand, to measure, to create something beautiful out of raw wood. As high school graduation approached, I dared to hope things might change. Maybe Mom would finally see me, be proud of me. But instead, she and Dad dropped a bombshell that left me reeling. "Girls," Dad said, his voice heavy, "your mother and I, we can't afford to pay for both of you to go to college." The room spun. I felt like I couldn't breathe. What do you mean?" Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's just not in our budget, Evelyn. You'll have to figure something out." I stumbled out of the house, barely aware of where I was going until I found myself on my grandparents' doorstep, sobbing. "Oh, honey," Grandma said, pulling me close. "What happened?" Through hiccuping breaths, I told them everything. When I finished, Grandpa and Grandma exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. "Evelyn," Grandpa said slowly, "how would you feel if we paid for your first 2 years of college?" I blinked, sure I'd heard wrong. You'd do that? Grandma squeezed my hand. Of course we would, sweetheart. We believe in you. For the first time in what felt like forever, a spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, I could make this work. With my grandparents' help, I managed to enroll in a public college a few hours away from home. Packing up my beat-up Honda Civic, I felt a mix of excitement and terror. This was my chance to start fresh, to be more than just the less favored daughter. As I drove away, watching my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror, I made a promise to myself: I was going to make this work, no matter what. Those first 2 years flew by in a blur of classes, new friends, and the intoxicating feeling of freedom. But as my grandparents' funding neared its end, reality came crashing back. I picked up every job I could find. Mornings, I'd sling lattes at the campus coffee shop, my hands perpetually smelling of espresso. Afternoons were split between shelving books at the library and tutoring freshmen who looked at calculus like it was written in alien hieroglyphics. "Evelyn, when's the last time you slept?" my roommate, Jen, asked one night as I stumbled in at 2 a.m. I shrugged, cracking open an energy drink. "Sleep's for the weak. I've got a paper due." It wasn't easy. There were nights I'd dinner on whatever I could scrounge from the vending machines, a bag of chips here, a granola bar there. But every time I thought about quitting, I'd remember my mom's dismissive words, and it would light a fire under me. I was halfway through my junior year when I got a call from Sophia. Her voice was tight, hesitant. "Ev, you sitting down?" My stomach dropped. "What's wrong? Is it Grandma and Grandpa?" No, they're fine," she rushed to assure me. It's about college." What she told me next made my blood run cold. Not only had our parents found money for Sophia's education, but they'd sent her to Wellesley, one of the most expensive private colleges in the country. "I'm so sorry, Ev," Sophia sobbed. "I had no idea. I'll drop out, I swear. It's not fair." "Don't you dare," I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. "This isn't your fault, Sophia. You deserve a good education." "But so do you," she protested. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "Yeah, well, looks like I'm getting one the hard way. Promise me you'll stay in school, okay?" After we hung up, I sat on my bed, staring at nothing. All those years of favoritism, and I'd still somehow believed there was a limit. That when it came to something as important as our futures, our parents would treat us equally. Stupid, naive Evelyn. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, I got up, washed my face, and headed to my shift at the coffee shop. As I tied on my apron, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, eyes bloodshot, hair a mess, but chin held high. "All right, Evelyn," I muttered to my reflection. "Time to prove them wrong." The morning after Sophia's call, I dragged myself out of bed, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. As I mindlessly scrolled through my phone, my mom's latest Facebook post stopped me cold. "So proud of my talented youngest. Off to the best college because she actually applied herself, unlike some. Proud mom, gifted child." My hand shook so bad I nearly dropped my phone. I read it again, and again, each word cutting deeper than the last. The implication was crystal clear: Sophia deserved the best, because she was talented. And me? I was just, what? A disappointment? Before I knew what I was doing, I was dialing Mom's number, my breath coming in short, angry gasps. "Hello?" Her voice was annoyingly chirper. "What the hell, Mom?" I spat out. "Your Facebook post? Really?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "Oh, Evelyn, don't tell me you're jealous of your sister's success." "Jealous?" I nearly screamed. "You lied to me. You said you couldn't afford college for both of us." "Well," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "talent needs to be nurtured, while mediocrity will cope on its own." The words hit me like a slap. "Mediocrity? Is that what you think of me?" "Now, don't be dramatic," she huffed. "If you'd shown any real promise." I cut her off, years of pent-up hurt and anger pouring out. Real promise? I busted my ass in school. I'm working 3 jobs to stay in college. How is that not showing promise? Oh please, she scoffed. Working as a barista isn't exactly setting the world on fire, is it? We went back and forth, voices rising, until I was shouting and she was coldly dismissive. Finally, I hung up, my whole body shaking. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Dad. Evelyn, he said, his voice stern. What's this I hear about you yelling at your mother? I felt a flicker of hope. Surely Dad would see reason. Dad, did you see Mom's post? Did she tell you what she said to me? But my hope was quickly crushed. Your mother is very upset. She's not feeling well because of your call. How could you be so ungrateful? Always causing problems. Ungrateful? I cut in, disbelief coloring my voice. Dad, you lied to us. You said you couldn't afford college for both of us, but you're sending Sophia to Wellesley. There was a pause, and for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, he was seeing my side. But then, your mother, she had some savings. For emergencies. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. For emergencies? And my education wasn't an emergency? I hung up, then turned off my phone. Sinking to the floor, I hugged my knees to my chest, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. Dad had always been my ally, the one who tried to make things a little more fair. But now? Now he was just another person who saw me as less than. Less talented, less worthy, less everything. Life went on, but the weight of my parents' betrayal hung heavy on my shoulders. I threw myself into work and study, barely allowing myself time to breathe, let alone think about my family drama. One night, exhausted from a double shift at the coffee shop, I collapsed onto my worn-out couch and mindlessly flipped through TV channels. That's when I stumbled upon this trashy show about family secrets and hidden parentage. Tonight on Family Secrets Exposed, the overly dramatic narrator intoned, we uncover the shocking truth behind one woman's lifelong struggle with maternal rejection. I snorted, about to change the channel, when the story caught my attention. This woman, let's call her Jane, had always felt like an outsider in her family. Her mother doted on her younger sister while treating Jane with cold indifference. Sound familiar? But then came the twist. Jane discovered she was adopted. Suddenly, everything made sense to her. Her mother's favoritism, her father's emotional distance. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. A wild, crazy thought wormed its way into my brain. What if? No, it couldn't be, could it? But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed to fit. Mom's blatant favoritism, Dad's gradual withdrawal, the constant feeling that I just didn't belong. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was Googling at-home DNA tests. My fingers shook as I placed the order, a mix of fear and anticipation coursing through me. When the kit arrived, I realized I had a problem. I needed samples from my parents, and there was no way they'd willingly participate. That's when I decided to loop in the one person I could trust, Sophia. You want me to what? Sophia exclaimed when I called her with my plan. I know it sounds crazy, I admitted. But Soph, don't you want to know the truth? There was a long pause. Okay, she finally said. I'm in. But if we get caught, I'm blaming you. It took some creative maneuvering on Sophia's part. She managed to snag a few of Mom's hairs from her hairbrush and swabbed the rim of Dad's coffee mug, but we got the samples. Then came the agonizing wait for results. When the email finally arrived, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely click on it. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the revelation that I was adopted, that I wasn't really part of this family. But the truth was far more shocking than I could have ever imagined. I was indeed my parents' biological child. But Sophia? She only shared DNA with our mother. Not our father. My mind reeled. Sophia wasn't adopted, she was my half-sister. I must have read the results a dozen times, trying to make sense of it. How was this possible? Did Mom have an affair? Did Dad know? I was still staring at my screen in shock when my phone buzzed. It was Sophia. Ev, did you get the results? What did they say? I swallowed hard. Soph, I think you should come over. There's something you need to see. An hour later, Sophia was sitting beside me on my lumpy couch, her face pale as she looked at the test results. This can't be right, she whispered. There must be some mistake. I shook my head. I don't think so, Sophia. Look at the confidence levels. It's pretty definitive. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. But that would mean that Mom had an affair, I finished for her. Yeah. We sat in stunned silence for a long while, the implications of this discovery sinking in. Everything we thought we knew about our family, about ourselves, had just been turned upside down. After the DNA test bombshell, I was a mess. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. The weight of this secret was crushing me. I decided not to tell Dad. I mean, how do you even start that conversation? Hey Dad, guess what? Your precious Sophia isn't actually your kid. Yeah, right. But fate, it seems, had other plans. It was a regular Tuesday when my phone rang. Seeing Grandma Eleanor's name pop up, I felt a flicker of warmth. At least I still had my grandparents. Evelyn, sweetheart, Grandma's voice was tight with worry. There's something you need to know. Your mother, she came to see us yesterday. She asked us to change our will. To disinherit you in favor of Sophia. We refused, of course. But Evelyn, what's going on? As I filled her in on everything, the favoritism, the college money lies, the DNA test, Grandma listened in shocked silence. Oh, Evelyn, she finally said. I'm so sorry. We had no idea it was this bad. I wiped away tears I hadn't realized I'd been crying. Thanks, Grandma. For telling me. And for not giving up on me. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, my mind racing. This was the last straw. No more secrets, no more lies. It was time for the truth to come out. As Christmas approached, I steeled myself for what I knew I had to do. When Sophia called to awkwardly explain that Mom and Dad were just having a small family dinner this year, I knew it was now or never. I drove home unannounced, my heart pounding as I pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I could see them all gathered around the dinner table, Mom, Dad, Sophia, even Dad's best friend Tom. The perfect little family, huh? I burst through the door, the cheerful Christmas music providing a surreal backdrop to the drama about to unfold. Mom's face darkened as soon as she saw me. Evelyn, what are you doing here? Your behavior lately has been absolutely unacceptable. The way you spoke to me on the phone, the trouble you've been causing. Trouble? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Oh, that's rich coming from you. Tell me, Mom, how long have you been lying to all of us? The room fell silent. Dad looked confused, Sophia pale and scared. Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What are you talking about? Dad asked. I took a deep breath. I had a DNA test done. Dad, I'm so sorry, but Sophia isn't your daughter. The room erupted. Dad jumped to his feet, his face a mask of shock and rage. Sophia burst into tears. And Mom? Mom just crumpled, sinking into her chair with a wail. Sarah, Dad's voice was barely a whisper. Is this true? Through her tears, Mom nodded. I'm sorry, Michael. I'm so sorry. It just happened. Tom and we've been in love for years. I never meant for it to go this far, but when I got pregnant with Sophia. Tom stood up, his face ashen. Michael, I can explain. Dad's fist connected with Tom's jaw before he could finish, sending him sprawling. As chaos reigned, I caught Sophia's eye across the room. She looked lost, broken. I wanted to go to her, to tell her this didn't change anything between us, but before I could move, Mom's voice cut through the noise. "I've always loved Tom," she sobbed. "And I couldn't help but love Sophia more. She was a product of that love." Evelyn. Evelyn was a reminder of a marriage I never wanted. The fallout from that fateful Christmas dinner was nothing short of nuclear. In the weeks that followed, our family imploded in spectacular fashion. Dad, reeling from the double betrayal of Mom and his supposed best friend, went on the warpath. He filed for divorce faster than you could say infidelity and came after both Mom and Tom for every penny he could get. I'll never forget the day he called me to his lawyer's office. "Evelyn," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I want you to have this." He slid a check across the table, and I nearly choked when I saw the amount. "Dad, I can't." He held up a hand. "You deserve it, kiddo. After everything, well, it's the least I can do. I used that money to pay off my student loans and even put a down payment on a small condo. For the first time in my life, I felt financially secure." Sophia, bless her heart, was a trooper through it all. She dropped out of Wellesley, saying she couldn't stomach being there knowing how it was paid for. "I'm going to do this on my own terms," she told me over coffee one day. "No more lies, no more handouts." I watched with pride as she got a job waiting tables and enrolled in community college. She was determined to forge her own path, and I admired her all the more for it. As for Mom, well, that's a wound that's still raw. Dad, the grandparents, and I cut ties completely. It wasn't easy, but after years of manipulation and lies, it felt necessary for our own mental health. Sophia still talks to her occasionally. "She's still our mom," she said to me once, her voice small. "Even if she's a pretty crappy one." I nodded, understanding, but not quite agreeing. For me, the mother I thought I knew had died the day the truth came out. Months passed, and slowly, we all began to find our footing in this new reality. Dad started dating again, tentatively. He and I grew closer than ever, bonding over our shared hurt and healing. Sophia and I? We became inseparable. All those years of Mom's favoritism driving a wedge between us melted away. We were sisters, through and through, regardless of DNA. One evening, as Sophia and I sat on the balcony of my new condo, sharing a bottle of wine, I found myself reflecting on everything we'd been through. "You know," I said, swirling the wine in my glass, "a part of me almost wants to thank Mom. If she hadn't been so awful, we might never have uncovered the truth. And as painful as it's been, I don't know. I feel like I know who I am now, you know?" Sophia nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that. It's like, the fog has lifted. So, what's next for Evelyn 2.0? I laughed. "God, I don't know. Finish my degree, I guess. Maybe travel a bit. The world's wide open." And it was. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. The weight of trying to earn Mom's love, of competing with Sophia, of never feeling good enough, it was all gone. My name is Carly, and this is how it all started, in a house too big for its warmth, and with a family that couldn't quite fit together right. I grew up in a city where the weather was as unpredictable as my mom's moods. I remember that morning, the clatter of dishes and the smell of burnt toast filling the air as Mom, Susan, moved around the kitchen. My stepdad, Richard, sat at the table, flipping through the newspaper, his glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. "You need to eat quicker, Carly," Mom snapped as I slowly spread jam over my toast. "I don't have all morning." I kept my eyes on my plate, counting the seconds. Richard sighed. "Susan, she's just a child. Let her be." Mom muttered something under her breath, then turned her attention to me again. "And look at you, always so sloppy. Can't you at least try to look decent?" I glanced down at my shirt, noting a small stain I hadn't seen before. Before I could respond, the phone rang, cutting through the tension. Mom answered it with a huff, her voice sweetening as she realized who it was on the other end. "Oh, hi, Tom," she cooed into the receiver. Yes, she's just finishing up her breakfast. No, no trouble at all. She shot me a look that said otherwise. When she hung up, she tossed the phone onto the counter. Your father will pick you up in an hour. Make sure you're ready. I don't want him coming to the door. Why can't he come in? I asked, my voice small. Mom's laugh was short and sharp. Why? You want everyone to see the kind of man he is? No, thank you. I have a reputation to maintain. I knew what she meant. Dad lived in a rundown part of town, his life a far cry from the polished existence Mom had with Richard. He drove an old, beat-up car and wore clothes from discount stores, but none of that mattered to me. He was Dad. He was kind. The hour passed quickly, and soon I heard the honk outside. Grabbing my backpack, I headed for the door. Remember what I said? Mom called after me. Directly to the car, Carly. No dawdling. Outside, Dad was leaning against his car, a smile lighting up his face when he saw me. Hey, pumpkin, ready for a fun weekend? I ran to him, his arms open wide for a hug. Yeah, Dad. As we drove away, I glanced back to see Mom watching from the window. Her expression was unreadable, but I knew she was relieved to have me out of the house. The drive was filled with small talk about movies and books, and plans for the weekend. Dad always made things simple, easy to understand, and never made me feel like I was too much or too little. He just accepted me as I was, and it was in those moments that I felt like I could really breathe. Life in our house took a turn when Mom announced she was pregnant again. I was 10, old enough to understand that this might change things, but not old enough to predict just how much. The day she told us, the kitchen had the sharp scent of lemon cleaner and the window was open, letting in the chatter of the neighborhood. I was doing homework at the table when she said it, just like that, no lead-in. I'm expecting a baby with Richard, she declared, her eyes shining. Richard was there, his hand on her shoulder, both of them looking like they'd won something big. Richard grinned, patting my head a bit awkwardly. You're going to be a big sister, Carly. Mom was watching me closely, like she was waiting for something more. Well, Carly? Aren't you excited? You'll have a little brother or sister. Yeah, excited, I mumbled, but her stare made me nervous. She had this way of drilling into you with her eyes. Over the next few months, the house filled up with baby stuff, new furniture, clothes, and toys. Everything was shiny and expensive, the kind of stuff that never filled my own room. Mom's belly grew, and so did her obsession with the perfect family image she wanted to showcase. The day my sister Lily was born, I was at school. I found out when Richard picked me up, his face serious. You've got a little sister now, Carly. Standing next to the crib, I felt clumsy and large. Lily was tiny, her face scrunched and red. I reached out, my finger lightly touching Lily's small hand. Her fingers curled around mine, and something tightened in my chest. She's really cute, I admitted, a genuine smile breaking through. Mom watched us, her smile tight but approving. Just remember, Carly, babies take a lot of work. You'll need to help out and not make things harder. I nodded, used to her warnings. Life at home shifted dramatically. Lily's cries filled the nights, and my help was enlisted more often than not. Carly, grab the diapers. Carly, can you watch Lily while I shower? It was tiring, but it was also the most Mom had spoken to me in a long time. Yet, it wasn't the warm, sharing tasks I had imagined. It was orders barked between the wails and the little sleep. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Lily's presence grew, as did the space she occupied in everyone's life but mine. My small corner room felt even smaller, my world reduced as hers expanded. I tried to find joy in it, in being the big sister, but often, it felt like I was just on the outskirts, looking in. Carly, don't be too loud. Carly, don't give her that, it's too small, she could choke. Carly, let's not bother your sister. Mom's constant instructions made it clear, I was the outsider in my own home, always stepping wrong, always too much or too little, never just right. When Mom told me I was moving in with Dad full-time, it didn't feel real. The news came out of nowhere on a cold Thursday evening. I was doing homework in my tiny room, the one that used to be a storage closet, before Lily came along. "You're going to live with your father," Mom announced, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed. Her voice was flat, like she was talking about the weather, not changing my whole life. I looked up from my books, confused. "What? Why?" "It's better this way. Richard and I can focus on Lily, and you, well, you need a change." She didn't even try to sound sorry. "Does Dad even know about this?" My voice cracked a bit. I wasn't sure if I was angry or scared, maybe both. "He agrees. Thinks it's a good idea." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Pack your things. He's picking you up tomorrow after school." The next day was a blur. Dad's car pulled up right after the final bell. I dragged my suitcase to the curb, feeling everyone's eyes on me. Dad jumped out to help, his face tight with worry. The drive to Dad's place was quiet at first. He kept glancing over, trying to read my face. "You okay, Carly?" "I don't know, Dad. It's weird. Mom just kicked me out." Dad didn't answer right away. "Look, it's tough, I know. But we'll make it work. You and me, okay? We're a team." Moving into Dad's apartment felt like stepping into another world. His place was small, cluttered with books and old furniture. There wasn't much room, and my room was actually the living room couch. That night, we sat at his tiny kitchen table, a pizza between us, trying to make plans. "School's different here, but you'll adjust. You're tough, Carly. Tougher than you think." The first few months at my new school were rough. The hallways were battlegrounds, and words, sharper than knives, were often thrown my way. "Hey, why you even here? Nobody needs another quiet mouse." Some would jeer as I walked by, my head down, my heart sinking a bit more each day. One evening, as I slumped on the couch staring blankly at a textbook, Dad came in from his late shift, looking as worn as I felt. He tossed his keys on the table and grabbed a couple of sodas from the fridge. He handed me one and sat down across, his brow furrowed with concern. "Carly, we need to talk about college. I've been doing some numbers, and well, I can't cover it. Not without some help." His fingers drummed on the table, a nervous habit of his. "So, what does that mean?" I felt a cold wave of worry. "It means there are a few ways this can go," he continued. "First, you could work hard, get involved, and maybe land a scholarship. Or, you might have to work and study, which won't be easy. And," he hesitated, then added, "there's always the option of not going at all." I shook my head immediately. "No, I don't want that. I'm not giving up on school." The determination in my voice surprised even me. Dad nodded, looking relieved. "I hoped you'd say that. So, think you can step it up? Maybe join some clubs, get your grades up?" From that night, things began to change. I approached school with a new purpose. Avoiding wasn't an option anymore. I started showing up early, staying late, and getting involved wherever I could. It wasn't easy at first. The library became my refuge, the place where I could escape the whispers and focus on what really mattered. One afternoon, Mrs. Jenkins, the school librarian who had taken a quiet interest in my frequent visits, approached me. "You're here a lot, Carly. Ever thought about helping out with the school radio? We need someone to manage the broadcasts." I hesitated, the idea of putting myself out there was terrifying. But then, I remembered Dad's words and my promise to myself. "Sure, I can help out," I managed to say. "Great. There's a meeting after school today. You should come," Mrs. Jenkins said with a smile, and just like that, I was involved. Working with the school radio was nothing like I imagined. It gave me a voice, quite literally, and people started seeing me differently. "Hey, that was a cool segment yesterday," someone would say, and I'd nod, a small smile creeping up. I even surprised myself by running for a student council position. Standing in front of the school, delivering my campaign speech, was one of the scariest things I'd ever done. "I'm here because I believe we can all do better, together," I declared, my voice shaking less with each word. When I won the presidency, even if only for a few weeks, it felt like a victory not just for me, but for anyone who had ever felt underestimated. By the end of high school, my efforts paid off. I received a grant to study finance in college, a field I had grown passionate about thanks to all the budgeting I did with Dad at home. It was more than just an escape from my situation, it was a chance to redefine it. The night I got the acceptance letter, Dad and I celebrated with cheap takeout pizza. "I'm proud of you, Carly. You did it," Dad said, his eyes misty. Leaving for college was bittersweet. I was ready to start fresh yet again, but leaving Dad and our little cramped apartment tugged at my heart. As I packed my bags, he came over with an old radio. "For your new dorm," he said, setting it beside my suitcase. College life started with its own set of challenges, but I was ready for them. I got an increased scholarship, which meant I didn't have to lean on Dad for money. That independence felt good, really good. I even managed to snag a part-time job at the college library. One evening, during one of our weekly phone calls, I told Dad about the job. He laughed, his voice warm and teasing over the phone. "Look at that, my daughter's keeping me afloat now." I chuckled, rolling my eyes even though he couldn't see. "Yeah, right, Dad. Just trying to follow in your footsteps without stepping on your toes." College wasn't just about work, I made sure to learn something from every class, every lecture. And then came the internship opportunity at a local financial company. The internship was intense. I was thrown into the deep end, analyzing market trends, preparing reports, and sometimes, handling clients under supervision. My boss, Mr. Henley, was a tough nut to crack, but fair. He didn't hand out compliments easily, so when he told me, "You've got a knack for this, Carly. Keep at it," it meant the world. As my college years wrapped up, I didn't just leave with a diploma, I left with a job offer from the financial company where I interned. It was more than I could have hoped for. I found a small apartment near work, and settled into a rhythm. Dad was over the moon when I told him. "That's my girl, making waves," he'd said on the phone, and I could practically hear his grin. A couple of years into my job, I was climbing the ladder, making a name for myself in the firm. It was at a party thrown by one of my former classmates that I met Arnie. He was funny, smart, and had a kindness in his eyes that drew me in. We started dating, and it wasn't long before I felt like he should meet Dad. The day came, and I was a bundle of nerves. We drove to Dad's place, Arnie with a bottle of Dad's favorite whiskey in hand as a peace offering. Dad opened the door, saw Arnie, and the first thing he said was, "So, you're the young man making my daughter smile like that?" Arnie grinned, handing over the whiskey. "I'm trying my best, sir." They hit it off, talking about baseball, the whiskey, and occasionally embarrassing me with tales of my less graceful moments. Seeing them together, getting along, meant more than I could say. Now at 28, with a career on the rise and a man who cared deeply for me, life was looking up. It wasn't just about making it on my own anymore, it was about building something lasting. And for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited about what the future held. The day I got the call from Mom was like any other. I was in my apartment, sorting through some work documents, when my phone rang. Seeing Mom flash on the screen was enough to make my heart skip a beat, it had been years. "Carly, I need a favor," she said, without any pleasantries. "Lily is going to college in your city, and we've paid her tuition. Can she stay with you?" The request caught me off guard. "Stay with me? As in, live here?" "Yes, it would really help us out. Plus, it could be good for you two to spend some time together," Mom pressed. I hesitated, the old feelings of being the less favored child creeping in. But I pushed them aside. "Okay, Mom. For you, I'll do it." Lily's arrival was like a whirlwind. She had 3 suitcases just for clothes and shoes, and her beauty routine took up more bathroom space than I thought possible. As days turned into weeks, her presence began to reshape my life. She was always either preparing for a party or recovering from one. Her idea of a quiet evening was coming home at 3 in the morning, tipsy and giggling on her phone. Her lifestyle was one thing, but what really strained our cohabitation was her attitude towards college and life in general. "I'm not really into the whole studying thing," she once said during breakfast. "I'm just here to have fun and maybe meet a rich husband." I choked on my coffee. "Lily, you need to take your studies seriously. Mom and Richard are paying a lot for your college." She shrugged, popping a grape into her mouth. "Whatever. I don't see why I should bother. That's like your thing, not mine." But the real trouble started when Arnie came into the picture. He'd been over a few times since Lily moved in, and I'd noticed the way she looked at him. I didn't want to believe she'd actually try anything until one night, Arnie pulled me aside, his expression grave. "Carly, we need to talk," he said, guiding me to the balcony for privacy. "Lily's been making advances. She's been pretty explicit about what she wants. I didn't want to tell you, but..." I felt a mix of anger and embarrassment. "I'll handle it." Confronting Lily was inevitable. I found her in the kitchen, flipping through a magazine. "We need to talk about Arnie," I started, trying to keep my voice even. She looked up, her eyes cool. "Oh? What about him?" "He's my fiancé, Lily. And he told me what you've been doing. It needs to stop." Lily laughed, a sound that chilled me. "Please, Carly. Like I'd want your boring finance guy. But if I did, I could have him. I get what I want." That was the last straw. "You need to find somewhere else to live, Lily. I can't have you disrespecting me and my relationship under my own roof." Within an hour of her shameful leaving, Mom called. "How dare you kick your sister out? You always were a difficult child, Carly. I should have known better than to trust you with your sister," Mom hissed, before hanging up. Sitting alone in my suddenly quiet apartment, I realized that no matter how hard I tried, it might never be enough for them. But as I looked around, I knew I had to protect my peace, my life, and my future with Arnie, even if it meant distancing myself from the family chaos once again. It had been 2 years since the fallout with Lily and the harsh words with Mom. My life had found a smoother rhythm, one filled with work achievements and quiet moments with Arnie. That peace was briefly interrupted when I heard about Lily through the grapevine. She had dropped out of college and was getting married to some rich guy she met. Curiosity and a sliver of familial duty nudged me to pick up the phone and call home to offer congratulations. It was Mom who answered, her voice as chilly as ever. "Hi, Mom. I heard about Lily. I just wanted to say congratulations," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Oh, is that so? Well, don't bother. We're not waiting for you at the wedding. It's for rich people, not beggars," she spat out harshly. The words stung more than I expected. "I see. Well, I wish her happiness all the same," I managed before ending the call, the familiar hurt settling in my stomach. Later, I learned they spared no expense for Lily's wedding. Lavish decorations, expensive attire, and even live singers, the works. It was all over social media, a spectacle for all to see. Fast forward 2 more years, and life brought its own surprises. Arnie, with his gentle smile and eyes full of love, proposed. It was simple, but perfect. No fancy backdrop, just us and the sincerity of our bond. Of course, I said yes. Excited, I called Dad first. "Dad," Arnie proposed. "We're getting married." "Really? That's wonderful, pumpkin. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Dad's voice boomed through the phone, filled with genuine happiness. Emboldened by his enthusiasm, I made a decision I knew might end in disappointment. I called Mom to invite her to the wedding. "Mom, I'm getting married. I would like you to come," I said, each word weighed with a mix of hope and apprehension. There was a pause, then a cold laugh. "To your wedding? With that man of yours? No, thank you. I don't mingle with losers." On the wedding day, everything was simple yet beautiful. the decorations minimal but elegant, the guest list small but heartfelt. Dad arrived early, beaming with pride. "You look beautiful, Carly," Dad said as he took my arm to walk me down the aisle. "Thanks, Dad. I'm glad you're here," I replied, squeezing his arm, the emotions of the day catching up to me. As we walked, I felt the weight of the past challenges lift. Here was a man who had never once made me feel less than loved, walking me toward a future with a man who cherished me just as deeply. The ceremony was everything I could have hoped for. Arnie's vows were heartfelt, and mine were a promise of commitment and love, witnessed by our closest friends and family. There were no grand gestures, just the pure, simple affirmation of our bond. Life had a way of coming full circle in the most unexpected ways. Just when Arnie and I were celebrating the news of our pregnancy, reveling in our little bubble of impending joy, my phone rang. The screen flashed Mom, a name that now brought more tension than warmth. "Carly," Mom's voice came through the line, sharp and urgent. "We need your help." "What's wrong?" I asked, despite a sinking feeling in my gut. "It's serious. We've lost everything. The house is mortgaged to the hilt, Richard's business has tanked, and, well, Lily's marriage didn't pan out either." "What happened with Lily?" I found myself asking before I could stop. She made some mistakes. Her husband has thrown her out, and he's demanding money for her cheating," Mom explained, each word laced with a mixture of anger and desperation. "We have nowhere to go, Carly. We need to stay with you, just until we sort things out." The request hit me like a ton of bricks. After years of minimal contact and outright rejections, this was too much. "Mom, I don't think that's possible." "What do you mean it's not possible? You owe us, Carly. After all, we are your family," she pressed, her voice hardening. "Oh, you? Mom, remember how you pushed me out when you thought I was too much to handle? How you never wanted me around unless it suited you?" I replied, my own anger rising. "That was different, Carly. This is serious. We are talking about being on the streets here," she countered sharply. "You made your choices, Mom. And I've made mine. I have my own family to think about now," I said firmly. There was a pause, a heavy silence that filled the space between my resolve and her disbelief. "You ungrateful child. I'll sue you. I'll get what's owed to me." I couldn't help but laugh, despite the seriousness of her threat. "Sue me for what, Mom? Taking care of myself? Dad was my guardian when you pushed me out, remember? You have no legal hold over me." I hung up, heart racing. It was a confrontation I had always dreaded, yet now that it was over, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had stood my ground, protected my boundaries, and most importantly, I was protecting the little life growing inside me. Arnie came into the room, his face etched with concern. "Everything okay, babe?" I took a deep breath, wrapping my arms around him. "It will be. We're going to be okay, all three of us." He hugged me back, his presence a reassuring fortress against the chaos of my family. "We'll handle whatever comes, together. This little one has the best, Mom." As we stood there, I felt the first fluttering movements of our baby, a gentle reminder of the new life we were about to welcome. It was a poignant moment, filled with the promise of new beginnings, and the affirmation that some family cycles were meant to be broken. My name's Nellie, and growing up in our house was like living under constant surveillance. Dad was a professor, his life revolved around the university, and he expected nothing less from me and my sister, Anna. Mom was pretty much the enforcer of Dad's rules, always making sure we were the perfect daughters. It was a regular evening at home, and I was trying to finish a book I'd been secretly reading under the covers for the past week. The living room was buzzing with the usual chatter about Anna's latest achievements. She went to high school, and every day there was a new reason for our parents to be proud. Dad's voice boomed from the living room, pulling me back to reality. "Nellie, can you come here for a moment?" Dragging myself away from my book, I headed to the living room. Anna was sitting on the couch, grinning like she'd won the lottery, while Mom was passing around cups of tea. Dad cleared his throat as I walked in. Sit down, Nellie. We were just discussing Anna's latest paper. It's been selected for the school's research journal. A significant achievement. That's great, I mumbled, forcing a smile. Anna shot me a look, her eyes sparkling with that all-too-familiar mix of pity and superiority. Mom chimed in, her tone laced with that nagging edge I knew all too well. Your sister works so hard. We're just hoping you'll start putting in some effort too, Nellie. We've yet to see you shine like your sister. I sank into an armchair, feeling the weight of their expectations crushing me. I'm doing my best, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Dad's response was quick, his words sharp. Your best? We expect excellence, Nellie. Not just best. You need to start thinking about your future, about making something of yourself. I wanted to scream, to tell them that I had my own dreams, that I hated biology and the sterile life they were pushing me into. But I knew better. Instead, I nodded, pretending to absorb their advice. Why can't you be more like your sister? Dad's question wasn't really a question, it was an accusation. Anna just sat there, sipping her tea, the golden child basking in her perfect little world. I stood up, feeling the need to escape before I said something I'd regret. I have homework, I said, turning towards my room. Remember, Nellie, Mom called after me, her voice stern. We're only hard on you because we care. You'll thank us one day. In my room, I closed the door gently, leaned back against it, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The walls of my room felt like the only place where I could be myself, away from their constant comparisons and impossible standards. High school felt like a minefield. Each step had to be calculated, or else it would set off an explosion at home. Anna was already in college, the pride of the family, leaving me to navigate the turbulent waters of my teenage years under the ever-watchful eyes of Mom and Dad. One particularly drab Tuesday, I decided enough was enough. If I had to play the part of the obedient daughter, I was at least going to find small ways to make it bearable. That morning, before school, I slipped on a bright red band under my dull gray sweater, a small act of defiance, but it felt like claiming a piece of my identity. At school, I was a different person. I hung out with Max and Liz, a couple of outcasts like me who didn't fit the typical mold. We'd skip the occasional class to hang out in the old music room, where I could finally breathe. Nellie, you coming? Max nudged me as the bell rang for the next period. Yeah, let's get out of here, I replied, grabbing my bag and following them. We settled into our usual spot, and I pulled out my hidden headphones, ready to drown in some music that Mom and Dad would never approve of. Liz watched me, an eyebrow raised. Still hiding that stuff from your folks? She asked, her tone a mix of amusement and pity. Yeah, Dad would flip if he knew I was into punk rock. You know how he is about proper influences and all that crap, I muttered, fiddling with the headphone cord. Max laughed, shaking his head. Man, your parents are something else. How do you stand it? I don't know. I just do what I have to do, I guess. Keep my head down, mostly. The conversation drifted away from me as I lost myself in the music, the lyrics pumping me up, giving me a dose of courage I desperately needed. Later that week, I decided to take an even bolder step. I'd been saving up from my part-time job at the local bookstore, a job Mom and Dad barely approved of, and bought a pair of ripped jeans. Hiding them in my bag, I changed at school on Friday, ready to feel a little more like myself. Walking home in those jeans felt exhilarating, but as I turned onto our street, my heart sank. There was Dad, waiting at the front door, arms crossed. Panic set in. I had forgotten he was home early on Fridays. What on earth are you wearing, Nellie? His voice was calm, but the disapproval was clear as day. They're just jeans, Dad. Everyone wears them, I said, my voice small, bracing for the storm. They are not just jeans. They are a statement, and not one we approve of. Go change. Now. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to yell back. It's just clothes, Dad. It doesn't change who I am. He stepped closer, his presence imposing. Everything you do reflects on this family, Nellie. Remember that. I stormed past him, slamming the door to my room behind me. The jeans were thrown into the back of my closet, hidden yet again. But something inside me had shifted. That night, I made a promise to myself. No matter how small, I'd keep finding ways to rebel, to be me. Even if it meant just a hidden streak of red or a song no one else knew I loved. When it was time for me to pick a university, the whole choice part was a joke. Dad had it all mapped out. I was going to the same university he taught at, just like Anna. The decision wasn't mine, it was handed down like a family heirloom I never asked for. The major? Biology, Dad's field. It's a respectable field, Nellie, and you'll have a secure future, he'd said the night we talked about my so-called choices. The truth? I had no interest in biology. I wanted to study literature, lose myself in books and stories, not cells and organisms. But that wasn't part of Dad's plan. Think about your future, Nellie. This is for the best, Dad had said that evening at dinner, his tone final. Mom just nodded along, adding, "Your father knows what's best, dear. Anna's doing wonderfully well, just follow in her footsteps." So, that was it. I enrolled in biology, and just like high school, college became another series of hoops to jump through. The first year was a blur of classes I had zero interest in. I'd sit in the back of lectures, doodling in the margins of my notebooks or getting lost in my thoughts, imagining I was somewhere else, anywhere else. One afternoon, I bumped into a senior student, Mark, at the campus cafe. He was a literature major, and we hit it off talking about a novel I had secretly been reading. "You actually like this stuff, huh?" Mark smiled, pointing at my biology textbook. "It's not by choice. It's complicated," I sighed, my usual defensiveness about my situation kicking in. "Sounds like a prison sentence," Mark laughed. "You should have gone for something you love. Why stick with something that makes you miserable?" His words hit too close to home. "It's not that simple. My dad's a professor here, in this department. I didn't have much of a say." Mark raised an eyebrow. "That sucks. But hey, maybe you can switch majors? Talk to someone in the lit department?" I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping. "You don't know my dad. Switching isn't an option. This is my life." As the year dragged on, I met with Mark a few more times. He became my window to the world I wanted to be part of. Through him, I got glimpses of literature classes, poetry readings, discussions that sparked a fire in me. But at the end of each meeting, I had to return to my reality, the world of biology labs and lectures that felt more suffocating each day. My last year at university was nothing short of a family spectacle, thanks to my sister Anna's grand wedding. She had recently introduced her fiancé to us, Michael, a lawyer 10 years her senior, working for a large corporate firm. My parents couldn't have been happier with her choice. He was exactly what they envisioned for both their daughters, successful, respectable, and financially secure. At their engagement party, the joy on my parents' faces was unmistakable. They had the perfect son-in-law. The wedding preparations were a flurry of activities where every detail, from the bridesmaids' dresses to the flower arrangements on the guest tables, was meticulously chosen by Mom. She relished her role, guiding Anna through every step, ensuring the day would be nothing short of perfect according to their standards. After the wedding, which went exactly as my parents had planned, Mom's visits to Anna became more frequent. She would often tell her how to manage her new home, advising her on everything from hosting dinner parties to managing finances, all the while hinting that I should start looking for a husband of similar caliber. "I hope you're paying attention, Nellie," Mom would say on her return from these visits. "You'll need to know all this when you find the right man. It's time you thought about settling down too." One chilly November afternoon, after another lecture I barely listened to, I decided to take a different route home through the old part of town. That's when I saw him, Jake, leaning casually against a vintage race car, a stark contrast to the world I was entangled in. "Nice car," I said, drawn to the bright red paint and the powerful engine sound. Jake looked up, a wide grin spreading across his face. Thanks. She's a beauty, isn't she? Took me ages to get her running this smooth. Wanna take a ride? I was just about to test her on the open road. I hesitated, glancing back the way I came. It would be so easy to just walk away, to return to the path laid out for me. But something in me rebelled at the thought. Sure, why not? I replied, surprising myself. It felt reckless, but exhilarating. The ride was liberating. The speed, the wind, the sheer freedom, it was intoxicating. For those moments, I wasn't Nellie, the biology student who was suffocating under her parents' expectations. I was just Nellie, the girl who could go anywhere and be anything. When we finally slowed down, Jake looked at me, his eyes curious. You seem like you really needed that escape. What's your story? I sighed, the weight of my world settling back on my shoulders. It's a long one. Let's just say I'm stuck in a life I never chose. He nodded, understanding more than I expected. I get it. I was there once, stuck, I mean. Until I decided to do something about it. Life's too short to live someone else's dream, you know? Over the next few months, Jake became my escape, my slice of freedom. We met often, driving for hours, talking about everything and nothing. He showed me that another life was possible, one where I could make my own choices. One evening, as the city lights twinkled below us, he turned to me, serious. Nellie, I don't want to be just an escape for you. I want this to be real, for us to take on the world together. What do you say? Looking into his eyes, I realized this was it. My chance to choose my own path. Yes, I said, my voice steady. Let's do it. Let's be real together. The day I decided to introduce Jake to my parents, my stomach was a tight knot of nerves. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Jake, with his leather vest, black t-shirt, ripped jeans, and hair tied back with a simple string, wasn't what my parents envisioned for me. He was the antithesis of the clean-cut, student-type professional, like my sister's husband, Michael. We walked up the driveway, and I could already feel the judgmental gaze that would come through the curtains. I took a deep breath and rang the bell. My heart pounded as the door swung open, revealing my mom, her expression transforming from surprise to shock in an instant. Mom, Dad, this is Jake, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jake stepped forward, offering a friendly smile. Nice to meet you, he said, extending his hand. My dad looked him up and down, ignoring the offered hand. What did you say you do for a living? He asked, his tone harsh. I'm a mechanic, Jake replied, undeterred by the cold reception. I also race cars. Mom gasped softly, clutching her chest as if the words were physical blows. Dad's brow furrowed deeply. A mechanic? And that's supposed to support my daughter? I jumped in, feeling the need to defend him. Jake is amazing at what he does. He's passionate and incredibly skilled. Dad snorted, shaking his head. Skills in racing cars? That's a hobby, not a career. What about your education? Jake was calm, though I could tell he was starting to get annoyed. I've completed specialized courses for my trade. I didn't go to university, if that's what you mean. The room went cold. Mom looked like she might faint. You expect to marry my daughter with no proper education? I love Nellie, Jake said firmly. I intend to make her happy. Happy? With what? Do you want to feel like a piece of trash in an old shabby apartment? Love doesn't pay the bills. Dad's voice rose, his temper flaring. I felt a surge of anger. I don't care about money. I care about being with someone who loves and respects me. I shot back. Dad pointed a finger at me, his face red. You're making a huge mistake. I won't allow it. We do not give our blessing to this farce. Mom's voice was shrill, panicked. You're not thinking clearly, Nellie. This isn't you. It's exactly me. This is who I am. Jake makes me happy, far more than any lifestyle you wish I had. I argued, my voice rising to match theirs. Dad was adamant. If you choose this man, you choose him over your family. We won't support this. If you leave with him, don't think you can come back. I took a deep breath, my decision clear. I choose us, Jake. I choose freedom and happiness, even if it means losing them. Mom burst into tears, and Dad's voice was cold as ice. Go then. And when he leaves you, don't come crawling back to us. I grabbed Jake's hand, pulling him toward the door. I won't. I'll never come back, I said, my voice steady, despite the tears I fought back. We walked out of the house, the door slamming shut behind us. The finality of that sound echoed in my heart. I had chosen my path, and as we drove away, I felt a mix of heartbreak and relief. The day of our wedding was bittersweet. I had secretly hoped that maybe, just maybe, my parents or Anna and her husband would show up, or at least send a card. But as the day went on, it became clear they wouldn't be part of it. The silence from their end was deafening, yet as I stood there exchanging vows with Jake, I felt a profound happiness that overshadowed the disappointment. After the wedding, life with Jake felt like a whirlwind of happiness and new beginnings. His passion for cars and his talent as a mechanic led him to pursue further training, specializing in servicing high-end, luxury cars. His reputation grew, and soon he opened his own company. It was a risk, but it paid off. Looks like all your hard work is really paying off, I told him one evening as we reviewed the company's growth charts. His face lit up with that smile that always made me melt. It's our hard work, he corrected me with a wink. Couldn't have done it without my top-notch dispatcher and business manager. Our personal life was equally rewarding. Jake's mom, who lived not too far from our new house, became like the family I had lost. She embraced me wholeheartedly, calling me her daughter, filling a void I hadn't realized was so profound. You're more of a daughter to me than an in-law, she would say, her warm embraces making me feel cherished and accepted. We would often have her over for dinner, or spend weekends together, exploring local markets or just enjoying each other's company. On weekends, Jake and I indulged in our shared passion for nature. We'd drive out in one of the sleek cars from his shop, always returning it spotless, of course, and find new trails to explore or quiet lakes to picnic by. These moments, away from the buzz of daily life, were our little slices of paradise. As our first anniversary approached, we decided to host a small celebration at our home. I handled the invitations, a pang of sadness hitting me as I realized I wouldn't be sending any to my family. Instead, I focused on the friends and the new family we had formed, those who had supported us and cheered us on every step of the way. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Jake and I were happily running our business, and our days were filled with a sense of accomplishment and contentment. My mother-in-law, who lived nearby, was a frequent visitor and had become like a second mother to me. Her visits always brought warmth and laughter to our home. One afternoon, she arrived looking unusually troubled, her brow furrowed as she took off her coat. There's a scandal brewing at the university, she said as soon as she sat down. It's all over the news. A professor has been accused of plagiarism and stealing someone else's scientific work. My heart skipped a beat. Did they say who it was? She shook her head. No, they didn't mention a name, but it's quite the talk around town. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. The university they mentioned was where my father worked. I hadn't spoken to him or my mother since the day I chose to marry Jake and leave my old life behind. After my mother-in-law left, I turned on the TV and flipped through the channels until I found the news. The reporter was standing in front of the university, talking about the allegations against a prominent professor. Then they flashed my father's photo on the screen. It was him. My hands trembled as I absorbed the news. His career, his reputation, everything was at risk. 2 weeks later, the issue was still a hot topic on the news when the unexpected happened. Jake and I were at our shop when I noticed a familiar car pulling into the parking lot. My breath caught in my throat as my parents stepped out. It had been years since I last saw them. The staff pointed them in my direction, and as they walked toward us, I could hardly recognize them. My mother had lost a lot of weight, her clothes hung loosely, making her look frail and aged. My father seemed a shadow of the man he once was, his posture slumped and his eyes lacking their usual firm resolve. As they approached, my mother's eyes filled with tears. "Nellie," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Mom," I replied, my voice neutral, guarding my feelings. "We need to talk to you," my father said, his voice low. I looked at Jake, then back at my parents, 1,000 memories and feelings swirling in my mind. I knew this conversation was inevitable, but I was not ready to simply let them back into my life without understanding their reasons for coming now, after all this time. "Not here," I said, indicating the busy shop around us. "We can go to my office." They nodded, and we walked to the small building next to the garage where I handled the administrative work. Inside, I offered them seats, but the air between us was thick with unsaid words and years of separation. Sitting across from my parents in the cramped confines of my office, the air felt thick with unsaid things and old grievances. My father's face was stern, etched with lines of stress and anger, while my mother appeared worn and anxious. "It was hard finding you, Nellie," my mother started, her voice quivering slightly. We've been through so much." My father's voice was gruff, his usual warmth missing. "I've been accused of plagiarism and theft of scientific work unfairly. I reached out to your sister's husband for help, thinking family would provide support without trying to make a profit from our misfortune." I raised my eyebrows, waiting for him to continue. "He wanted to charge an exorbitant fee," Dad continued, his tone sour. "Your sister sided with him, choosing her husband over her own family. So, we had no choice but to disown her." There was a cold irony in his words, a mirror to the past when they had turned me away for choosing Jake. "And now you come to me?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Yes," he said bluntly. "We need a place to stay. We've had to sell the house to cover legal fees. We have nowhere else to go." I couldn't help but laugh, a short, harsh sound that filled the small office. "You disowned me, remember? You literally cursed me, wishing I'd fail and come crawling back." The pain of that day, still vivid in my memory, surged forward. "And now you expect what? That I'd welcome you with open arms?" My mother's face crumpled. "We're still your parents, Nellie. How can you turn us away?" "Because you taught me how," I replied sharply. "When you chose your pride over your daughter, you showed me that blood isn't thicker than water, not always." Dad's eyes narrowed. "We are your family. You owe us." "I owe you nothing," I shot back. For once, Anna made the right decision, and I'm proud of her for standing by her husband. It's more than what was ever afforded to me. The room grew colder, the tension palpable. My mother began to shout, calling me ungrateful and heartless. Jake, who had been silent beside me, stood up, his presence commanding. "I think it's time for you to leave," he said calmly but firmly. He turned to one of our workers visible through the office window. "Make sure they don't come back here," he instructed quietly. My parents were left standing in the middle of the room, a final look of shocked defeat on their faces as we walked away. That was the last time I saw them. In the months that followed, Jake and I grew even closer, united against the turmoil that had tried to tear us apart. We welcomed a daughter into our family, a new beginning in the truest sense. My mother-in-law, ever supportive, was a constant help, showering her new granddaughter with love and affection. Life moved on, and the pain of the past began to fade, overshadowed by the joy of the present and the promise of the future. I had learned that family isn't always defined by blood, but by the bonds you choose to nurture and protect. My name's Emma, and I've got a twin sister, Sarah. You'd think being twins would make us close, but it couldn't be further from the truth. We might have popped out on the same day, but that's where our similarities end. From day one, it was clear I wasn't what my parents wanted. They'd planned on having just one kid, and I guess I was the unwelcome surprise package. Sarah was the spitting image of our mom, all blonde hair and blue eyes. Me? I took after Dad's side of the family, with dark hair and eyes that reminded everyone of my grandmother. The same grandmother my mom couldn't stand. Grandma's shoe store was my sanctuary. From the moment I stepped inside, the familiar scent of leather and polish wrapped around me like a comforting hug. The rhythmic tapping of heels on hardwood floors created a soothing melody that drowned out the chaos of my home life. This place felt more like home than our cramped apartment ever did. "There's my little entrepreneur," Grandma would call out, her voice warm and welcoming as I burst through the door after school. Her face, lined with years of laughter and wisdom, would light up with genuine joy. For once, I felt truly wanted, truly seen. I started helping out in the store when I was barely tall enough to see over the counter. Grandma would lift me up, perching me on a high stool so I could watch her work the old-fashioned cash register. As I grew, so did my responsibilities. By the time I hit my teens, I knew that store inside and out. It was different at home. "Emma, why can't you just wear what your sister's wearing?" Mom would huff, trying to squeeze me into another frilly pink nightmare. "It looks so cute on Sarah." I'd stare at my reflection, feeling like a clown in a rhinestone-covered sweatshirt with a seal plastered across the front. "I look stupid," I'd mutter. As we got older, the differences in how they treated us became even more obvious. Sarah was the princess who could do no wrong. Me? I was the workhorse. "Emma, you need to work hard and make something of yourself," Dad would lecture. "Then you can help take care of your sister and us." "But we're the same age," I'd protest. "Why doesn't Sarah have to work hard too?" Mom would give me that look, the one that said I was being a pain in the ass again. "Your sister has other talents. You need to focus on being responsible." Responsible. That was their code word for, do everything we tell you to do, and don't complain about it. We lived in a tiny apartment. Dad worked as an insurance agent, and Mom was a shop assistant. Money was always tight, but somehow Sarah always got what she wanted. New clothes, the latest gadgets, you name it, she had it. The only thing that kept me going was the knowledge of the secret stash. Grandma, Dad's mom, had given my parents a big chunk of change when we were born. It was supposed to be for our college education. Both of us. "Remember, Emma," Grandma had told me once when I was staying at her place. "That money's for you and Sarah to go to college. Don't let anyone tell you different." I held on to that knowledge like a lifeline. It was the one thing that made me feel like I had a future, like I wasn't just the family workhorse. As our 16th birthday approached, a tiny spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe now that we were older, stepping into adulthood, Mom and Dad would start treating us more equally. Maybe they'd finally see me for who I was, not just as Sarah's less desirable shadow. Boy, was I in for a rude awakening. The morning of our birthday dawned bright and clear. Sarah was still asleep, probably dreaming of the party Mom had been planning for weeks. I, on the other hand, was up early, my stomach churning with a mix of anticipation and dread. Dad called me into the living room just as I finished my toast. His face was unreadable, and he was holding a small metal box. Mom stood beside him, her lips pressed into such a tight line they almost disappeared. "Emma," Dad said, his voice oddly formal, like he was addressing a stranger instead of his daughter. "It's time you learned about responsibility and saving money." He handed me the box. It was heavier than it looked, and cold to the touch. A safe deposit key, I realized with a sinking feeling. "If you want to go to college, you'll need to earn the money yourself," Mom chimed in, her tone clipped and matter of fact. "This is for you to keep your savings in." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All the air rushed out of my lungs, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. When I finally found my voice, it came out as a strangled whisper. "But, what about the money Grandma gave you for our education? Where's that?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mom's eyes narrowed dangerously, and Dad suddenly became very interested in a spot on the wall behind my head. "There is no money for your education, Emma," Mom said, her voice ice cold and sharp enough to cut. "You'll have to earn it yourself if you want to study." "But Grandma said," I started, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Grandma had told me about that money, had made it clear it was for both Sarah and me. You are not to breathe a word of this to your grandmother, Mom snapped, cutting me off mid-sentence. Her eyes flashed with a warning that made my blood run cold. If you do, I'll make sure you never see her again. Do you understand? I nodded mutely, my throat too tight to speak. Grandma was the only bright spot in my life, the only person who seemed to truly care about me. The thought of losing her was unbearable. I clutched the useless safe deposit key so hard the metal edges dug into my palm, but I barely felt the pain. The apartment buzzed with excitement as Sarah's friends poured in, their chatter and laughter filling every corner. I stood in the kitchen, feeling like a ghost in my own home. Mom had made it clear, I wasn't to invite anyone. This was Sarah's night. Emma, come on, it's cake time, Dad called, his voice overly cheerful. I trudged to the living room, where Sarah sat beaming in front of a massive cake, 16 candles flickering. Everyone sang. Sarah closed her eyes, made a wish, and blew out the candles. The room erupted in cheers. I silently cut the cake, handing out slices to Sarah's friends, before taking one for myself. As I took a bite of the sickeningly sweet frosting, Mom and Dad exchanged a look. Sarah, honey, we have a surprise for you, Dad said, grinning. Come with us to the parking lot. 10 minutes later, Sarah burst back in, practically glowing with excitement. She was clutching a set of car keys, twirling them around her finger. Mom and Dad got me a car, she squealed. Can you believe it? I have the best parents ever. She pranced over to where I sat, dangling the keys in front of my face. So, sis, what did you get me for our birthday? I stared at her, my mind blank with shock. A car. They'd bought her a car, while I got, what? An empty safe deposit box and a lifetime of debt. Well? Sarah pressed, her smile turning smug. What's my gift? Something inside me snapped. My absence, I spat, standing up so quickly, my chair toppled over. That's my gift to you, enjoy it. I stormed off to our shared bedroom, ignoring the shocked silence behind me. With shaking hands, I pulled out my suitcase and started throwing clothes into it. Emma, what are you doing? Mom's voice came from the doorway, more annoyed than concerned. I'm leaving, I said, not looking at her. I'm going to stay with Grandma. As I pushed past her, dragging my suitcase behind me, she grabbed my arm. Remember, she hissed, not a word to your grandmother about the car or the college money. Understood? I yanked my arm free and walked out, not bothering to say goodbye. No one tried to stop me. The bus ride to Grandma's seemed to take forever. By the time I got there, it was late evening. Grandma opened the door, her face a mix of surprise and concern. Emma, what are you doing here, sweetheart? I thought you were out celebrating with friends. Of course. Another lie from Mom. I just wanted to see you, I mumbled, suddenly exhausted. Can I stay here tonight? As I lay in bed that night, in the quiet comfort of Grandma's guest room, the events of the day washed over me. The safe deposit box, the car, the party, it all swirled in my mind like a toxic whirlpool. I wanted to tell Grandma everything, to let it all pour out. But Mom's threat echoed in my ears. I couldn't risk losing Grandma. She was all I had left. The next morning, I woke up with a plan forming in my mind. As Grandma bustled around the kitchen making breakfast, I took a deep breath and dove in. Grandma, I was wondering, could I maybe work at your store? Like, properly? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. And, maybe stay here for a while? It's just, things are so noisy at home with Sarah and all. Grandma turned to me, spatula in hand, her face softening. Oh, sweetheart, of course you can. I'd love to have you around more. Just like that, my life changed. I started working at the shoe store after school, learning more about the business side of things. Grandma was a patient teacher, showing me everything from inventory management to dealing with difficult customers. Every evening, we'd close up shop together and head home. Grandma would cook dinner, asking about my day, actually listening to my answers. For the first time in my life, I felt truly cared for, truly loved. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I didn't go home, and honestly, I didn't want to. Mom and Dad never called, never checked in. It was like I'd disappeared from their lives, and they were fine with it. Grandma insisted on paying me a full salary, saying I'd earned it fair and square. I saved every penny I could, watching my bank account grow. But even with Grandma's generosity, college still felt like a distant dream. There was just never quite enough. Before I knew it, my 18th birthday rolled around. High school graduation followed soon after. I sat in the auditorium, watching as Sarah's name was called. Mom and Dad cheered loudly, beaming with pride. When my name was called, there was only Grandma's enthusiastic clapping from the back row. After the ceremony, I watched as my parents fawned over Sarah, taking pictures and handing her gifts. They didn't even glance my way. It stung, but I was almost used to it by now. "You did good, kiddo," Grandma said, hugging me tight. "I'm so proud of you." On the drive home, I took a deep breath and made my announcement. "Grandma, I think I'm not going to college this year." Grandma's brow furrowed in confusion. "But why, sweetheart? I gave your parents money for both you and Sarah's tuition. There should be plenty for you to go." My heart raced as I scrambled for an explanation, Mom's threat echoing in my ears. "I want to save up more money," I said, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I want to be able to rent an apartment near campus, you know? Pay for my own accommodation. I just want to be more independent." Grandma studied me for a moment, and I held my breath, praying she wouldn't see through my lie. Finally, she nodded. "That's very mature of you, Emma. If that's what you want, I'll support you." So that's what I did. While Sarah packed up for college, showered with new clothes and dorm supplies, I threw myself into work. Every day at the store taught me something new, not just about shoes, but about life, business, and myself. Living with Grandma and working at the shoe store became my new normal. Every morning, I'd wake up early, help Grandma with breakfast, and then head to the store. The smell of leather and polish that once represented my escape now felt like home. I threw myself into work with a determination that surprised even me. During the day, I'd help customers find the perfect pair of shoes, my smile never faltering even when dealing with the most demanding clients. In the evenings, after we'd closed up shop, I'd mop the floors, reorganize displays, and make sure everything was spotless for the next day. "You've got a real knack for this, Emma," Grandma would say, watching me expertly handle a difficult return or upsell a customer on shoe care products. As the months went by, Grandma started teaching me more about the business side of things. I learned how to manage inventory, balance the books, and handle paperwork. It wasn't always easy, but I soaked up every bit of knowledge I could. "You know, you could run this place someday," Grandma told me one evening as we went over the monthly accounts. "You've got entrepreneurial spirit in your bones." Her words filled me with a pride I'd never felt before. For once in my life, someone saw potential in me. But even as I immersed myself in the world of retail, my dream of college never faded. Every paycheck I received, I'd squirrel away most of it, allowing myself only the bare minimum for necessities. It wasn't easy. I'd see girls my age walking by the store, shopping bags in hand, laughing with their friends. I'd watch as they tried on beautiful shoes that I could easily afford with my employee discount but chose not to buy. Every time I said no to a night out or a new outfit, I reminded myself of my goal. The year flew by in a blur of shoeboxes, receipts, and saved paychecks. Before I knew it, I was looking at my bank account, hardly believing the number I saw there. I'd done it. I'd saved enough for college. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed the number I hadn't called in a year. "Hello?" Mom's voice answered, sounding surprised. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I wanted to let you know that I've saved up enough for college. I'm going to apply for next semester." There was a long pause on the other end. Then, why don't you come over? We should talk about this in person. I agreed, a mix of emotions swirling in my stomach. As I hung up, I caught my reflection in the store window. The girl looking back at me wasn't the same one who'd run away a year ago. She was stronger, more confident. As I stepped into my old apartment, the familiar scent of home was gone, replaced by the sterile smell of fresh paint and new furniture. Mom greeted me with a forced smile, ushering me inside. "Emma, darling, come see what we've done with the place," she chirped, leading me through the living room. Dad trailed behind us, nodding along as Mom pointed out every new feature. The tour ended at what used to be my shared bedroom with Sarah. Now, it was a Pinterest-perfect space, clearly designed for one. "We had a designer come in," Mom gushed. "Isn't it just perfect for Sarah?" I stood there, feeling like a ghost in my own past. "Where's all my stuff?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "My books, my photos, everything I left behind?" Mom and Dad exchanged a quick glance. "Oh, honey," Mom said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "We had to clear out all that old junk. You understand, right? We needed to make space for new energy." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Years of memories, pieces of myself, all tossed away like trash. I blinked hard, fighting back tears. "Why did you ask me to come?" I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. Mom's smile faltered for a moment. "Let's sit down, shall we? I'll make us some tea." Soon, I found myself perched on the edge of the sofa, a cup of tea and a plate of my once favorite cookies in front of me. The sweetness now felt like ash in my mouth. "Emma, sweetie," Mom began, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We're in a bit of a situation. You see, Sarah, well, she decided college wasn't for her. She dropped out after a year." I sat there, stunned. All that money, wasted. Money that was supposed to be for both of us. "The thing is," Mom continued, not meeting my eyes, "we need some help. About $20,000, to be exact." I nearly choked on my tea. "What? But that's most of the money I saved for college." "Oh, Emma," Mom sighed, reaching out to pat my hand. I resisted the urge to pull away. "You don't really need college, do you? You're doing so well at Grandma's store. And living with her, you don't have many expenses." My mind was reeling. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Besides," Mom added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "Sarah needs an apartment. She has a boyfriend now, and they want to live together. We thought we could use the money for a down payment on a mortgage." She trailed off, suddenly realizing what she'd said. Her eyes widened as she glanced at Dad, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. The air in the room felt thick, charged with tension and unspoken truths. "No," I said firmly, my voice stronger than I felt. "I won't give you the money. Why don't you sell Sarah's car? Or use the money Grandma gave you for my education?" Mom's face underwent a rapid transformation, first paling to a ghostly white, then flushing an angry red. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "There is no money left, Emma," she spat, her words dripping with venom. "We spent it all on Sarah's car, the renovations, new furniture, clothes. And now the car's totaled. Sarah had an accident while drunk, so insurance won't cover it." Each word felt like a physical blow. All that money, meant for my future, gone. Squandered on frivolities and Sarah's recklessness. "Besides," Mom continued, her voice abruptly shifting to a sickeningly sweet tone that made my skin crawl, "girls don't really need college. You should focus on finding a good husband." The casual dismissal of my dreams, my hard work, my entire future, ignited a fire in my chest. "What about my interests?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "What about what I want?" Mom waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away an annoying fly. "We are thinking of your interests, Emma. This apartment will be yours after we're gone. Isn't that enough?" I couldn't help it, I laughed. I don't want your apartment. I want an education. I worked hard to save that money, and it's mine. Mom's face contorted with fury, transforming her features into something almost unrecognizable. She loomed over me, her voice dropping to a menacing growl that sent chills down my spine. You will do as you're told, Emma. Give us the money, now. But something had changed within me. The fear that had kept me compliant for so long shattered, replaced by a steely resolve. With a swiftness that surprised even me, I ducked under her outstretched arm and bolted for the door. Their voices followed me down the stairs, a cacophony of threats, curses, and insults that echoed in the stairwell. But with each step I took, they seemed to lose their power over me. As I walked home, the cool evening air clearing my head, my mind raced. Suddenly, a thought hit me like a bolt of lightning, stopping me in my tracks. Why hadn't I told Grandma about the money? The money she'd given my parents for my education, which they'd squandered on Sarah? The realization washed over me in waves. I'd been silent out of fear, paralyzing fear that Mom would follow through on her threat to keep me from Grandma. But I was 18 now. An adult. They couldn't control me anymore, couldn't dictate who I could or couldn't see. As soon as I stepped into Grandma's house, the words tumbled out of me like a dam breaking. I told her everything, about the money she'd given my parents for our education, how they'd spent it all on Sarah, how they'd forced me to earn my own way and then tried to take that from me too. Grandma listened, her face growing more thunderous with each revelation. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Those lying, manipulative. She muttered, then took a deep breath. Emma, I'm so sorry. I should have checked up on this years ago. Before I could respond, she was on her feet, phone in hand. I watched in a mixture of awe and trepidation as she dialed my parents' number. The conversation that followed was like watching a storm roll in. At first, my parents denied everything. But Grandma was relentless, her voice rising with each lie they told. Finally, they cracked, admitting to everything. How dare you? I heard Dad yell through the phone. Emma, you ungrateful snitch. Grandma's eyes flashed dangerously. Don't you dare speak to her like that, she snapped, then hung up. She turned to me, her face softening. Emma, sweetheart, I promise you this, I will protect your interests. You focus on your future, and let me handle them. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into college applications. It felt surreal, finally pursuing my dreams without the weight of my family's expectations holding me back. Then, out of the blue, Sarah called. Hey, sis, she chirped, as if the last few years hadn't happened. I need a favor. Can you lend me $4,000? I nearly choked. What for? There's this amazing online course on how to seduce rich men, she explained, excitement in her voice. I'm gonna land myself a millionaire, get rich quick. I'll pay you back, promise. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sarah, that's insane. And gross. I'm not funding that. Oh, come on, she whined. Don't be such a prude. I broke up with Jake. I don't want some boring, ordinary life. I want wealth, luxury. No, I said firmly. Absolutely not. Don't call me again for stuff like this. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of pity and disgust. That was the last time I spoke to Sarah or my parents. Months passed. I started college, majoring in business management. Every day felt like a gift, learning, growing, becoming the person I was meant to be. One weekend, Grandma came to visit. As we sat in my tiny dorm room, she dropped a bombshell. Your parents had to sell the apartment, she said. They're drowning in debt, loans they took out for Sarah's schemes. They showed up at my door, asking to move in. My breath caught. What did you say? A small, satisfied smile played on Grandma's lips. I told them exactly where they could go. Reminded them of how they'd treated you, how they'd lied to me. They're not my problem anymore. I hugged her then, tears in my eyes. Grandma, thank you. For everything. For believing in me, for standing up for me. I don't know where I'd be without you. As we sat there, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road hadn't been easy, and I knew there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in my life, I was free. Free from manipulation, free from unfair expectations, free to be myself. I'm Jenna, and let me tell you, my life's no fairy tale, but it's mine. Married to Jack for 9 solid years, best years of my life, honestly. He's a keeper, works like a dog, all loyal and smart. We met back in college, hit it off over a cold pizza at some midnight cram session and haven't stopped yapping since. We tried, for kids. But life's got a funny way of throwing your plans back in your face. Every month, hope would build up like a balloon and burst just as fast. Jack's boss? That's Tom, my big bro used to be my hero when we were kids. Always had my back. Then he went and married Lisa, and let's just say, she ain't exactly warmed my heart. She's this tall drink of water, looks like she stepped out of a magazine and never misses a chance to remind you. They had this big, fancy wedding, all glitter and loud music, not really my cup of tea. I like things simple, Give me a good book, a quiet room, I'm set. Lisa, though, she's got to live it up like every day's her last. Fancy clothes, parties every other night, and never without that high-heeled click-clacking across the floor. I remember the first time I met her. It was at Tom's place, a few days before their wedding. The house was packed with her friends, all loud and flashy like a TV show. I walked in, and there she was, center of it all, laughing like she owned the world. Jenna, right? She said, eyeing my simple dress like it was made of sackcloth. Tom's little sister. He said, you're a teacher? Yeah, that's me. High school English, I replied, trying to sound chipper. She gave me this smile, all teeth and no warmth. Adorable. Must be nice, playing with kids all day, right? Her friends giggled, sipping their fancy drinks, and I just nodded, feeling about as welcome as a skunk at a lawn party. Tom was all smiles, though, clueless to the chill. Hey, Jen, glad you could make it. Lisa's just dying to get to know you better. Sure, Tom. If by dying you mean barely tolerating. But he's my brother, what was I gonna do? I plastered on a smile and mingled, kept out of Lisa's way best I could. When my phone rang that afternoon, and I saw it was Lisa, my heart sank. She had this way of calling with demands wrapped up like invitations. Hey, Lisa, what's up? Jenna, darling, we're having a little soiree this Saturday. You should come over, it'll be fun. Her voice was all sugar, but I could hear the steel underneath. I hesitated. Parties aren't really my thing, Lisa. Her tone shifted, colder now. Well, I wasn't inviting you as a guest, Jenna. I need you to help out. Serve drinks, clean up, that sort of thing. My jaw clenched. Are you serious? Dead serious. Tom's away, and I can't manage on my own. You'll be helping your brother out, too, in a way. I wanted to say no, tell her to hire someone if she needed help that badly, but the threat was clear. Lisa knew how to play her cards, knew that with Tom not around, she could push harder. Fine, Lisa. I'll be there. The call ended, and I tossed my phone on the bed, frustration boiling inside me. Jack watched me, frowning. What did Lisa want now? I sighed, shaking my head. She's throwing a party and wants me to help, serve drinks, clean up, the works. That's not fair, Jenna. You're her sister-in-law, not her servant. I know, but she made it clear that if I don't help, it could come back to bite you. I can't risk your job over this. The day of the party arrived all too soon. I showed up at Lisa's house right on time, dressed in a simple black outfit, not too fancy, but good enough to not embarrass myself. The house was already buzzing with activity, preparations in full swing. Lisa greeted me with a smirk. There you are. You can start by helping in the kitchen. Drinks need to be prepared. The kitchen was a flurry of activity, and I got to work, setting up trays of drinks, cutting lemons, getting everything ready for the guests who would soon be arriving. As the party started, I found myself weaving through groups of Lisa's friends, offering drinks, and cleaning up used plates and glasses. Lisa watched me from a distance, a satisfied smile playing on her lips whenever our eyes met. Halfway through the evening, as I was collecting empty glasses, Lisa cornered me in the kitchen. "You're doing a good job, Jenna. Maybe you should consider a career in catering." I gritted my teeth, washing another glass a bit more forcefully than necessary. "I love my job, Lisa. I'm here tonight because you asked." Lisa leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Let's keep it friendly, Jenna. We wouldn't want any family conflicts, would we? Especially not with Tom away." The threat was veiled, but clear. I nodded stiffly, returning to my tasks. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of fetching, carrying, and cleaning. By the end of the night, my back ached, and my feet were sore. As the last guests left, Lisa found me by the door, picking up discarded coats. "Thanks, Jenna. You really saved the day." Her gratitude sounded hollow to my ears. I just nodded, too tired to argue. "I did what you asked, Lisa. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get home." She smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Of course, Jenna. We'll see you at the next one, won't we?" The weeks rolled by, and every weekend was the same story. Lisa's lavish parties became a regular thing, especially when Tom was out on those never-ending business trips. I spent my Saturdays setting up and my Sundays cleaning up. It was like clockwork, only without any of the precision or satisfaction. Watching Lisa at these parties was another kind of torture. She'd flutter around, laughing too loud with men who weren't her husband, and each laugh felt like a jab at my patience. One night, things got worse than usual. As I was picking up yet another tray of discarded appetizers and empty glasses, Lisa sauntered over, a wicked grin plastered on her too-perfect face. "Jenna, darling, you missed a spot over there. And be a dear, refill my friend's drinks, would you?" she said, her voice dripping with a condescension that made my skin crawl. I looked down at the tray in my hands, then back at her, and something in me just snapped. I couldn't take another second of her demeaning tone. Without thinking, I dropped the tray I was holding right in front of her feet, the clatter echoing louder in my ears than probably necessary. "I'm not your servant, Lisa. I'm done," I declared, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. Her face turned an interesting shade of red, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Oh, Jenna, you just made a big mistake. You think you can just stop helping and there won't be consequences? Watch your back, and maybe your husband's job while you're at it. Remember your place." But I was already turning away, untying my apron as I went. "Find someone else to clean up your messes," I called over my shoulder, not caring any more about the consequences. The drive home was a blur. I was so wound up with anger and relief, it was hard to focus on anything else. Closer to home, I calmed down, and a cold fear replaced the anger. What had I done? The next evening, Jack came home, his face ashen, his hands shaking. "Jenna, Tom, he yelled at me today. In front of everyone. Called me incompetent. Said I was a liability." My heart sank. Lisa wasn't just making empty threats. "It's going to be okay, Jack. We'll figure this out," I said, though I felt anything but certain. No sooner had I reassured him than my phone rang again. "Lisa." Part of me wanted to hurl the phone against the wall, but I answered. "Feeling the heat yet, Jenna?" Lisa's voice was smug, victorious. "That was just a taste. Keep defying me, and Jack's next performance review could be his last." I squeezed the phone, my knuckles white. "What do you want, Lisa?" "It's simple. Get back to your duties, and Jack stays safe. Keep up your little rebellion, and watch his career, and yours, crumble." I ended the call, feeling trapped. I couldn't tell Jack, it would crush him. But going back to that house, bending to Lisa's whims, it went against every fiber of my being. I was stuck, caught between my pride and my fear for Jack's future. Tom came back from his long trip all smiles and dropped a bombshell that turned everything even more upside down. "Jenna, I've got great news. Lisa's pregnant." His eyes were shining with pure joy, the kind that should have been contagious, but all I felt was a sinking feeling in my gut. That's wonderful, Tom," I managed to say, pasting on the most genuine smile I could muster. Inside, doubts were swirling because I knew Lisa hadn't been a saint, especially not with how she acted at those endless parties. As the weeks rolled on, Lisa's pregnancy became the new focus of her life, and by extension, mine. Morning sickness hit her hard, and somehow, I ended up being the one running around, doing all the chores for her while Tom was blissfully unaware of the real dynamics in his house. One afternoon, as I was chopping vegetables for dinner, Lisa waltzed into the kitchen, a sour look on her face. "Ugh, I can't stand the smell of food. Why do you have to cook such disgusting things, Jenna?" I clenched my teeth, keeping my focus on the carrots instead of her taunts. "Lisa, if you'd like something else, just let me know what you want. I'm trying to make things you can stomach." She scoffed, leaning against the counter with a hand on her belly. "Whatever. It's not like you'd understand what it's like, being pregnant and all. You just play house without a clue about real motherhood." Every visit was the same. Lisa found new ways to dig at me, her remarks slicing deeper each time. And Tom, bless him, was too caught up in his soon-to-be father glow to notice. He thought I was helping, because I was just that nice. One evening, as I was tidying up the living room, Tom caught me off guard. "Jenna, I really can't thank you enough for all you're doing. Lisa tells me how helpful you've been. We're so lucky to have you." I forced a smile, my heart aching with the need to tell him the truth, to spill everything about Lisa's cruelty. But I held back, knowing it would only hurt him. "It's no problem, Tom. I'm happy to help out." As I left their house that night, Lisa's parting shot was a whisper, just loud enough for me to hear. "Keep playing the martyr, Jenna. It suits you, since that's all you're good for." Night after night, I cried myself to sleep, the barbs from Lisa embedding themselves deep. But every morning, I'd wipe my tears, square my shoulders, and prepare myself for another day of battle. It was a cycle of pain and pretense, and with each passing day, my resolve wore a little thinner. Lisa's delivery day came sooner than anyone expected. "He's a bit premature," she announced over the phone, but her voice lacked the warmth you'd expect from a new mother. When I first saw the baby, he didn't seem premature at all. He was a healthy, crying bundle, looking right on time to me. But who was I to argue? Tom was over the moon, oblivious to Lisa's detachment. "We're naming him George, after our granddad," he beamed, cradling his son with a pride that lit up the room. I smiled back, genuinely happy for my brother even though my heart ached with a mix of joy for him and sorrow for my own unfulfilled dreams. Lisa's approach to motherhood was anything but warm. As soon as she got home, she was obsessed with getting back into her pre-pregnancy clothes and resuming her social life. She wasted no time shifting all baby duties onto me. "You don't mind, do you, Jenna? This is probably the closest you'll ever get to being a mom," she'd say, her voice dripping with a cruelty that she thought was humorous. Her words were like daggers, but I swallowed the hurt. I couldn't let it show. Jack and I ended up taking care of George more and more. It wasn't long before we grew attached. Holding him, feeding him, even changing his diapers felt like blessings in their own exhausting, beautiful way. Every time Tom left town, which was often, her parenting switched off. Lisa dropped George at our place with barely a goodbye, dressed up and ready to party. "Take good care of him. Mommy's got to unwind," she'd chirp, kissing George on the forehead with practiced affection before heading out the door. The situation reached a new low one evening when Lisa came to pick George up after one of her nights out. She reeked of alcohol, her makeup smeared. She scooped up George, who whimpered at the sudden movement. "You're such a saint, Jenna. Really, I don't know what we'd do without you," she slurred, her words laced with sarcasm. I bit my tongue, holding the door for her. Just making sure he's safe, Lisa. Sure. Safe with Auntie Jenna, she laughed, stumbling slightly as she walked to her car. Watching her drive off, my heart raced with worry for both Lisa and the baby. So, we continued in this painful routine, providing a makeshift home for a child that wasn't ours, while his mother lived as if she was still childless. Each time Lisa fetched George, leaving behind a house that felt too empty without his giggles and cries, I felt a pang of loss. It wasn't right, none of it. But there was little we could do but hope and wait for something to change. A couple of months later, Jack and I moved to a new place, a bigger apartment, closer to the school where I teach. It was a fresh start, or so we thought. We were still unpacking, boxes everywhere, when my phone rang. Lisa's name flashed on the screen, sending a familiar jolt of stress through me. Hey, Lisa. What's up? I tried to keep my voice neutral. Jenna, I've left George with you for the weekend. I'm off to Milan for a sale. Couldn't miss it. Her voice was breezy, like she was talking about dropping off a borrowed book, not her child. I froze, a box half unpacked in my hands. What do you mean you've left George? Where? At your place, silly. I rang the bell, but no one answered. He's in his car seat, outside the front door, she replied, her tone turning impatient. I felt the blood drain from my face. Lisa, we moved. We're not at that address anymore. What? The panic in her voice mirrored the pounding of my heart. You moved? Why didn't you tell me? Jenna, you have to go get him. Now. I hung up without another word, grabbed my keys, and told Jack I had to go back to our old apartment. The drive felt like the longest of my life, each red light a torturous pause in my rush to ensure George was safe. Pulling up to the old place, my worst fears weren't realized, thank goodness. There he was, just as Lisa said, asleep in his car seat, abandoned at the doorstep of a now empty apartment. Relief washed over me, quickly replaced by a surge of anger so intense it shook me. I scooped George up, checking him over for signs of distress. Thankfully, he was just fine, oblivious to the chaos. Driving back to our new apartment, I tried to calm my racing thoughts. How could she be so careless? So reckless with her own child? Once home, I set George up in the spare room, still shaking. I called Lisa back, my voice cold and steady from resolve. He's not there, Lisa. I don't know where your child is. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, frantic, what do you mean? Jenna, this isn't funny. Where's my son? Come back and look for him yourself, I snapped, the lie bitter on my tongue. And don't call me until you're back in the country. I hung up, my hand trembling, and dialed Tom's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice tired and distant. Tom, you need to come home. It's urgent, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What's happened? Is it Lisa? George? His voice was suddenly alert, laced with concern. It's about George. Please, just come home as soon as you can, I insisted, feeling the weight of everything bearing down on me. All right, I'm booking the next flight out. Hang tight, Jenna, he said before hanging up. I sat down, finally allowing myself a moment to breathe. George, now safely playing with some toys on the floor, looked up at me with innocent eyes. My heart ached for him, caught up in the mess his mother had made. Jack came over and put an arm around me, his presence a comforting weight. The morning was tense. Tom arrived looking haggard, having flown straight from the airport. Without wasting a moment, I led him to the living room where little George was playing quietly. Tom, we need to talk, I began, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. Lisa left George at our old doorstep before flying off to Italy. She didn't know we moved. Tom's face drained of color, his eyes widening in shock. What? She left him alone? Outside? Yes, but there's more. I handed him the envelope containing the DNA test results I had secretly obtained a month ago, suspecting Lisa's fidelity. Tom, I'm so sorry, but you need to see this. He opened the envelope with trembling hands. As he read the contents, his complexion turned a ghostly white, and he looked up at me, agony and disbelief etched across his features. Just then, the doorbell rang. I glanced at Tom, signaling him to stay with George in the next room, and went to answer the door. It was Lisa, her face a mask of fury and panic. She barged past me, her eyes wild. "Where is he? What have you done with my baby?" "I didn't find him, Lisa," I replied, blocking her way further into the apartment. She thrust her phone at me. "Call Tom. Tell him you lost George. Tell him it was all your fault, or I swear, Jenna, I'll ruin your husband's career. I'll make sure Tom fires Jack." I stood firm, locking eyes with her. "No, Lisa. I'm not afraid of you anymore. And there's something you should know, I'm aware of your affairs. Tom isn't George's father." Her laugh was bitter, laced with contempt. "You think Tom will believe you over me? He's nothing without me. I control everything. And who's going to believe a barren woman like you?" At that moment, Tom stepped back into the room, George cradled in his arms, the DNA test results in his hand. Lisa's face fell as she saw him, her confident demeanor crumbling. Tom's voice was low but filled with an icy fury. "Lisa, this is over. I've seen the DNA test. You've been lying to me, to all of us. I'm filing for divorce, and I'll be seeking full custody of George." Desperation took hold of Lisa as she fell to her knees, grabbing at Tom's feet. "Tom, please, I made a mistake. Forgive me. I can change." Tom stepped back, his expression hardening. "I can't respect someone who abandons their child. You're also going to face legal consequences for your actions." He gently put George down, who clung to my leg, watching the scene unfold with wide, scared eyes. Tom turned back to Lisa. "You need to leave. Now." Lisa's pleas turned into sobs as she realized the finality in Tom's voice. Her makeup smeared as she cried, her figure a stark contrast to the poised, controlled person she always pretended to be. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but I had no sympathy left to give. After the storm that was Lisa's departure and the revealing of all her lies, the days began to settle into a new kind of normal. Tom went through with the divorce, and it was messy for a bit. The court didn't look kindly on her actions, abandoning her child and cheating. They left her with nothing of Tom's and even slapped her with a hefty penalty to pay him. The guardianship service stripped her of her parental rights after what she pulled, leaving little George legally free from her. During this time, I visited Tom a lot, helping him adjust to life as a single dad. He was grateful, always thanking me for stepping in, but I could see the struggle in his eyes. One evening, after I'd put George to bed and Tom and I sat sipping tea, he dropped a bombshell. "Jen, I need to talk to you about something serious." I nodded, pushing my tea aside. "What's on your mind?" "It's about George. I've tried, I really have. But every time I look at him, I see her and what she did. It's eating me up, Jen." His voice cracked, and he looked away, ashamed. I reached over and squeezed his hand. "It's okay to feel that way. You've been through a lot." He shook his head, his eyes moist. "No, it's not okay. He's an innocent kid. He shouldn't have to suffer because I can't get past this. I've been thinking, maybe there's a better option for him." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying, Tom?" "I'm saying that maybe George would be better off with someone who can give him a real family, without the baggage. Like you and Jack." The idea took my breath away. Jack and I had come to love George as if he were our own, but this was a big step. "Are you sure about this, Tom? He's your family." Tom wiped his eyes, nodding slowly. "I know. And I love him. But I love him enough to want what's best for him. I think you and Jack could be what's best." I didn't say yes right away. Jack and I spent a long night talking it over. It wasn't a decision to make lightly, but in our hearts, we both felt the same. The next day, I went back to Tom. "We'll do it," I said, my voice steady. "We'll adopt George. Tom's relief was palpable. He hugged me tight, whispering thanks. The adoption process wasn't instantaneous, but it moved faster given the circumstances and with Tom's full support. Now, months later, our apartment is lively with the sounds of a family, a real family. Jack and I, we couldn't have kids of our own, but that didn't matter anymore. George filled that void in ways we never expected. He calls me Mom and Jack Dad, and every time he does, my heart swells with a joy I can't describe. Weekends are the best times. We play in the park, we have movie nights, we cook together. The laughter and love echo through the rooms of our home, drowning out any echoes of the pain from the past.